Senator Malcolm Roberts, welcome to the George Mamalis show here on YouTube. It's great to have you on. How are you going today?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's good to be on, George. I'm looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, I'm looking very much forward to it because it's been a big 2 weeks just generally in the zeitgeist of Australia. So you're kind of the perfect guest to have on because I feel like in Parliament and across everything you've done for many years now, you seem to have almost prophesized the future of what Australia is about to head into. So kind of want to go straight into it with mass immigration and kind of highlighting the economic failures of Australia and why did Australia even go down this road? That's my big question. I know why we're here, but I don't know how we got here. What's happened in the last, I don't know, 2 decades that's allowed this to manifest in Australia, do you believe?
2 decades, that takes us back to 2005. That's probably a good starting point. That's when mass immigration started. And the problem Australians are discussing now, and it's more and more Australians. Pauline's been on about this since 1998. Our office has led the way in the most recent times in the national discussion on housing and immigration, mass immigration. People in Australia are very accepting of other people and other cultures. Very, very accepting. So they're not opposed to migrants. People in Australia are opposed to mass migration because it's destroying the fabric of our country. So where do you start? There are so many aspects. First of all, there's numbers. Secondly, there's quality of the people that are allowed in the country. Thirdly, there's culture, cohesion, unity, spirit. Every entity has a spirit. It might be negative, it might be positive, but every entity has a spirit. And it's tangible. When you sit back and look at it, you can feel it. And the fourth thing is the impact of multiculturalism, which is preventing assimilation. So no one in Australia is opposed to good people coming into the country who can contribute to the economy. What people in Australia are increasingly opposed to is people coming in and destroying the culture, because that's the most important thing that determines productivity, safety, risk, creativity. It's essential. Whether it's a football club or a sporting club or a church or a business or a corporation. And I was on a podcast with a former British immigration minister, and we were being interviewed and asked questions. And honestly, George, it was like he was reading from my notes and I was reading from his notes because they're almost identical. And the point I'm making is that the roots of this destruction of our country, and it is the destruction of our country, are outside the country. And it's the globalists that are pushing this. This is an agenda to destroy national borders. The Hungarians have said go to hell, and Viktor Orban has closed the borders. The Poles have said go to hell. The very tight, what I call the tight five. I'm not talking about economics here being miserable or miserly. I'm talking about very, very tight on immigration, who they let into the country. We've got Japan, we've got Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, China. They're very fussy about who they let into the country. And they have to be, and they're doing their duty, because the number one people that should be looked after by government are the people who are already here in our country. And we're not being looked after. And that's what we saw on the streets. And I don't know if you took part in any of the marches on Sunday, George. But
Yep.
Which one? Adelaide?
Yeah, I was in Adelaide, so I got to film the whole thing live from start to finish, essentially.
What was the feeling?
It was beautiful. The first 90% of the march was absolutely extraordinary. It felt like Australia Day of 10 years ago. There was a diverse group of people from young to old, from all races, from all nationalities, from all cultures coming together, and it just felt like just like it was needed. There was almost like an essential. It was almost like energy was lifted in the whole city, because it just felt nice to be proud of your country again. But then, unfortunately, the last 5% was when all the drama went down between the organisers and the NSN, who basically essentially hijacked it. There's conflicting stories on the ground. One, the NSN group claimed that they were meant to be speaking, and then there was two organisers. One was the major organiser who didn't want them to speak, and then the second organiser was the one to put them on the stage. And as soon as they got on the stage, it basically just, the whole thing collapsed, essentially. And you felt that spirit, that pride kind of just leave. And it became more about self-ego, entitlement. Yeah. And it became it became almost like I said it on live stream, it became like an episode of Love Island. It was very dramatic and self-indulgent. It didn't feel very Australian in that moment. So that was my major, I guess, criticism of that group and what they did that day.
Were you in Canberra for the COVID marches? When was that,
No,
2023?
unfortunately not. No, I was
You
not
probably
here for
heard
that.
about the spirit there.
Yeah.
I can remember walking with my wife and other people that we met down there over the bridge on Commonwealth Avenue. And I looked at my wife and said, this is the first time since COVID that I felt proud to be an Australian. That's all I said to her. And the feeling was just, you get goosebumps just when you're in that state. And everyone agreed with me around me. 10 abreast, we're marching across the bridge in Canberra Avenue. And when we got up near the top of the hill, we looked back and it was going for kilometres. So the 400 people were a bit of a miscount. But anyway,
Yeah.
the point I'm getting to is I've been feeling very ashamed of our country and disappointed in our country's leaders. They're not leaders, they're just puppets. And I felt that same pride in Canberra on Sunday, marching with Pauline and Tyron Whitten at the head of the parade, head of the march. And honestly, we didn't tell anyone where we were going, we just turned up. And the cheers that we got, and particularly Pauline, were just phenomenal. It was really inspiring. And that's not what we're not in it for the ego. We're not in it for the congratulations and the compliments. We're in it for the feeling of the country, and the country felt really, really proud and happy. I started my speech by saying Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. We got an oi, 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 and it just continued right throughout the march, sporadically. So people are genuinely proud, and they were so happy to see some politicians endorse their march, and so. The feeling was just fantastic because what's really going on here is not about being anti-migrant. It's very pro-migrant because Australia has been built on migrants. I'm guessing you've got a migrant background yourself. I'm a migrant, born in India. But it's about mass migration. But it's actually about much, much more, George. It's about the destruction of our country, and people are losing their country. And I set up Australia's largest underground coal mine, and we did some revolutionary things right at the start. We had to build the culture because I know the culture is the most important thing. You can spend all the research and the money getting the best equipment in the world, but if you've got people who aren't fired up and who aren't working safely, you might as well just have lousy equipment. And so we built the culture deliberately, very deliberately. And what we're seeing in this country is the culture being destroyed. So the Australian culture is extremely important, and the tight 5 Asian countries, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, China and Singapore, very tight on their migration. They're not racist. They just want to look after the existing people in the country, number one. And what we're doing in this country is not looking after the people of Australia. And we need to start looking after the people of Australia. There's an agenda to destroy our culture, because when you destroy the culture, you destroy the spirit of the people. And you also... anything goes, and they've tried doing that. They want to destroy the family. They want to destroy religion, Christianity in particular. Christianity you don't have to be a Christian, but you have to follow Christian principles to live in coordination with or consistently with our constitution. So it's a Christian country without everyone having to be Christians. Religious freedom is part of Australia's constitution. So what people are sensing is the loss of the values of this country, the loss of family, the loss of national pride, the loss of identity. And people's identity, doesn't matter where you are in the world, people's identity is tied up with the identity of their country. There are two fundamental structures for human civilization, human society: family and national culture. That's it. That's basically it. And then you get off on your, whether you support the Adelaide Crows or the Port Adelaide or whatever it is. That's fine. But above all, it's Australian, and above all, it's family. And that's what they want to smash, and they want to smash religion. So, because then when you do that, there's no identity with the country, and it just becomes a free-for-all, and then the global agenda comes in. And the global agenda is about getting a one-world, unelected socialist global governance, and about getting us back to feudalism, where you and I, instead of being inspiring or inspired and creating things and being committed to the country and to whoever employs us, to ourselves, if nothing else, then we're committed to being serfs again. It's a restoration of feudalism. I mean, we could talk for hours on this topic.
Yeah, no, it's an important thing, because one thing I noticed is, this is the argument economically speaking. Why is there mass immigration? Well, clearly because due to, the population, the fertility rates, and just the culture. The culture, like, I'll give you perspective from, like, people in their 30s are told, don't have kids, live a career life, be self-indulgent, go travel the world, maybe have one kid when you turn 35 or 37. That's kind of this is the culture of the young Australians at the moment. And it's not sustainable, I believe, long term to, maintain a nation. If you're told to just have one kid, but maybe have one kid, and a lot of the young people as well are afraid to have kids because of climate change hysteria. Like, for example, I hear a lot of people say, "I don't want to have a kid." Yes, well, that's what they say. I don't want to have a kid because I don't want my kid to go through the Armageddon of climate change. So and you'll be shocked how many people have this mindset. So this low fertility rate, I think it comes down to a few things. One, it's obviously the culture has changed. Spirituality has been sucked out of the country at tremendous rates, particularly in the early 2000s, when it was kind of cool to be an atheist. Due to people like Dawkins and a few other authors who kind of popularized atheism, and it was kind of the edgy, cool thing to do. And then also, I think a big thing that we're missing is, if you look at fertility rates across the whole world, and this includes countries considered third world countries or not fully developed yet, well, their fertility rates are also dropping. And I think that's a big part to do with microplastics in our food, in the air. And studies have recently shown there's microplastics in the air, because as the waves hit the sand, it shoots up all the microplastics, because a lot of the microplastics live in the ocean. So, I mean, I think that potentially could be humanity's greatest threat, is this microplastic issue, which doesn't get talked about enough. And I mean, Elon Musk likes to bring it up quite a bit, but yeah, for example, I'm not sure if you noticed, but in my my immigration side of the family, they came from Greece, so that's where my family come from, Greece. Greece's fertility rates are so low that they're starting to shut down the schools because they just don't have the population to maintain schooling systems anymore. That's how bad it's got.
Well,
and I like to look at Greece as a precursor to the future, because, with that pride of my ancestors' past, Greece to me is the cradle of Western civilization. It's the birthplace of democracy, all these great things. And I always look at why is that the first country to take the biggest hit? And I think it's almost like a symbolic thing by the globalists. Globalists are almost like pagan-like with their ways. They like to follow numerology. They like to follow certain rituals. And it looks quite symbolic. If we can take down Greece, if we can show the first Western country how weak they are, how they don't have any fertility, how in 20 years there won't even be Greeks left, it's kind of like a strong place for the globalists to come from, to kind of shut everything down. And we saw that back in 2007, 2008. By collapsing the country's economy, it turned a people who were proud, a people who were, full of culture, into basically slaves to the system. And it was very interesting to watch.
It so well.
Yeah. So
the Greeks are great. I've got many friends who are Greek. There's a wonderful spirit to them. It's tied up with family. It's tied up with Christian values. Even though it is a very old the first Western civilization. But not only is Greece the birthplace of democracy, America is now the world's largest democratic democracy. And they're trying to smash that down. They're trying to smash this down across the West. There are so many things we can talk about, because what you see going on in this country is going on in Britain. It's going on in the United States. It's going on in New Zealand. It's going on in Canada. And it's going on across Europe. And Europe was the forerunner to this, because senior UN bureaucrats who are pushing for a globalist governance, unelected, have said their model for unelected socialist global governance is the EU. And the EU is a unicameral parliament that's just a facade. You can talk to the British members of the European Parliament. They agree with that. But it's run by bureaucrats. It's not a democracy at all. But coming back to your point about some of the anti-human behaviours, that you see in the anti-national behaviours, the fundamental, and you've said how bad that is for the future and immigration and natural birth rates. There's something far, far worse, but it's an extension of what you've said. I agree with you entirely, and that is that. I'll tell you a story. I've told this many times. Going around the country as a volunteer for about 9 years, in 2007 to 2016, before I got into the Senate, I was working as a volunteer and spoke about the climate fraud around the country, from Perth through to Melbourne, through to Cairns in the north, many cities in between. And one of the people who was on the trail as well was Bob Carter, Professor Bob Carter, the late Professor Bob Carter, a wonderful man. And a lot of these climate people who are speaking up against the climate fraud are older, retired people, because they're not going to lose their tenure because they haven't got tenure, so they can speak passionately about it. And Bob Carter and I were having a break at one of the rallies, and he said, "Malcolm, this climate scam must be the biggest scam ever." And I said, "Bob, it's not even close." He said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Look at the money scam, the way they print money and control money." "Oh, yeah, that's far, far bigger." And I said, "But it's not the biggest." And he said, "What?" And I said, "The anti-human scam. What we're seeing around here is a deliberate, orchestrated movement from the United Nations, from the World Economic Forum, to paint humans as anti-environment, anti-planet, greedy, nefarious, irresponsible, uncaring. Nothing could be further from the truth." And I just wrote down the words of Maurice Strong, who's the one who fabricated climate fraud, the one who fabricated the globalist agenda, fabricated 21st century global governance, Agenda 21, which is now Agenda 2030. And he said, "The enemy is humanity. The enemy is humanity." Gorbachev also said the same thing. He was a notorious globalist, painted as a liberator of Russia. And he said, the enemy is humanity itself. And when you've got little kids, from infancy, just tiny little kids, being indoctrinated at schools, in the family, through the television, through the media, that humans are the enemy, what does that set up for the future? I mean, it's destroying humans. It's destroying humanity. And when they're targeting the West, because we're the people with the lifestyle and the time to be able to listen to this crap, then it applies across the Western nations. And then you get globalists pushing the agenda through our national leaders. And the policies of the Labor Party and the Liberal Party are almost identical. Pauline Hanson called out Agenda 21 in 1998, 27 years ago. I called it out in my first speech in the Parliament, and we're the only ones. So bit by bit, people are starting to wake up to it, George. So what I'm saying is that the anti-human scam is the biggest scam on the planet. It's the most destructive scam on the planet. That's not taking anything away from the microplastics or the use of toxins in our homes, in our food. They're all at play towards the dwindling birth rate. But I think the bigger things with dwindling birth rates are cost of living, housing, and tax rates, for example, and the fact that who wants to have children today? Please have children today. We need them, but who wants to have children today when they think that humans are the scourge, when humans are the enemy, and we've got to bring kids into this kind of environment? I've heard the same thing you've been saying. The anti-human scam is a lie. It is a scam. It's a myth, but it's being very effective at decreasing birth rates and national populations.
Yeah, and to be clear, we haven't even mentioned the elephant in the room, which is the grand experiment that we saw unfold in 2020 with this mRNA experiment. Who knows what kind of effect that's had on fertility. And that also kind of links to my theory on why is their fertility rates dropping across the entire world, including developing countries.
That's spot on.
I know people personally, I won't say their names, who have lost their ability to have their fertility is gone. Like, they just can't. And it's very sad for them because these people wanted to have families. They wanted to live normal lives. And because of this grand experiment that, the globalist agenda push us upon, it is very anti-human, and it feels almost like you've mentioned Christianity, you've mentioned ideology, you've mentioned the spirit, right? And that's very rare to hear from senators or just politicians in general these days. It used to be quite common back in the day when, the US were doing their magic and kind of showcasing to the world what it means to be a almost like a holy country in a sense, a long time ago. Um, do you think this is deeper? Though I want to get a bit theological here. Do you think there's almost like a holy war, like a spiritual war occurring at constant battle, and the forces of good and evil? How does that play out in Parliament? Because I'll give you an example. When I worked in state Parliament here in South Australia, when I walked into that room, into those rooms, it was, don't get me wrong, it was stunning. It's a beautiful old building, but at the same time, energetically, I felt a huge darkness inside there.
Yeah.
Almost like I was battling something, like it felt like the building itself was possessed by something very dark. And I couldn't really put my finger on it, or I couldn't really kind of comprehend what I was dealing with, but it was a very uncomfortable feeling. And I'm not sure what it's like in Canberra, because I only worked in the federal office here in Adelaide, but is there that sense of darkness in Canberra as well? Is there something greater beyond just the human faces you see there? Or is that just something that was a bit part of my imagination?
You are spot on. There is that very dark feeling in Canberra. Look, I've got to confess, the only reason I go to Canberra is because what we're doing helps the people that we're supposed to serve and that we are serving, the people of Queensland and the people of Australia. That's the only reason I go there. I detest flying into Canberra. I detest waking up and getting into the Senate. I detest the behaviours of the people in the Senate. Just look at question time. What a joke. Well, it's not a joke. It's so sad. I've spoken about that in the past. I've called attention to the President, called the President's attention to it. These people are not serving the people of their state and the people of Australia. They're serving themselves, their agenda. Perhaps, you're getting into the topic of ego versus reality. And I've had an association with Montessori schools. I went to one in India where I was born for the first, from age 4 till 6 or 7 whenever we left. I think I was 6 or 7 when we left. And I know what Maria Montessori is acknowledged as the world's greatest. She's dead now. She died in 51, I think, at 80-something years of age. But she was meticulous in her observation, a medical doctor who loved kids, and then she started observing children. She's the most meticulous and thorough and practical and now scientifically proven an understanding of teaching of human behaviour and human development. And she said the critical years for the formation of both character and intellect are birth to 6. It's basically all over from then on. Of course, there's fine-tuning up until adolescence when our brains change and modernize, but basically it's logged in. The significant thing, though, George, is that we don't start thinking rationally and with reason until about the age of 9, and then we develop our reasoning skills. So that means that I believe that God created us as entities, okay? But you created George, and I created Malcolm, and not in God's image. We separated ourselves from that. And I ask the question, did we do that? Is that part of the human journey? Well, it's definitely part of the human journey. But then I fabricate Malcolm, and then I spend the rest of my life until I die, hopefully to die happy, by actually looking back at reality and realising Malcolm's not real, but my real self is very, very, something very, very much to be proud of. So what I see is the journey away from the ego back to our real self. And
Yep.
we all get caught up in different stages of that, and I think politics is driven by the ego, largely. Pauline Hanson's one of the few people without an ego. Alex Antic has minimal ego. He's driven by a philosophy, I think. But most of the people are just drones. They're just sheep. They're just slaves. They kowtow to the party, and the party is the worst thing about politics, because people who are good people, good thinking people, they go and enter politics with an aim to care, but they soon get it squashed out of them, knocked out of them. They follow as drones to the party, and then they start destroying the country, and they don't even know it. Or sometimes they do. I've spoken about the climate fraud in very strong terms, and walked out of the chamber, and 2 Labor politicians, for example, quite often pat me on the back and say, "Keep going, mate," because they're passionate about workers. They're 2 of the few people in the Labor Party who're still loyal to workers. Most of them have abandoned the workers and pushing the globalist agenda. But they're saying this climate scam is destroying the future of our workers in this country. And so, but they won't stand up. And the same with the Liberal National Party. Every major climate and energy policy has been introduced by the Liberal National Party. and then Labor comes in and ramps it up. Every one of them, their policies are almost identical. So it is a globalist agenda, and it's the ego that's doing it. And I think we've got to liberate people with the truth, because the truth comes out. Oh, where can you? There's so much to talk about in the truth, but if we get back to truth, that's fundamental. That's why we speak out based on the data, George. I don't know if that's where you wanted to go, but that's what I see.
No, it's quite clear that there's definitely almost an emulsion of the Liberal Labor Party, and when I was growing up, I used to think.
You mean the Uni Party?
Yeah, well, that's what it feels like. It just feels like they've become one, almost essentially, and it's almost like a tag team in wrestling. They tag each other in, tag each other out, and they just continue doing the same old thing. But growing up, I used to think the Liberal Party was supposed to be almost like the father figure of Australia, and the Labor Party were the mother figure. If you want to vote, if you need your mother, and when you need your mother, you go to her for love, for care when you've hurt yourself, and she'll take care of you, she'll look after you, but eventually she'll send you on your way. And the Liberal Party was that father figure who would tell you the hard truths that you need to hear, and tell you what reality is really about, and how important it is to innovate and work hard. And it just feels like the Liberal Party isn't the father anymore. It's more like the side boyfriend who of the Labor Party, and it feels like we've lost almost that father figure. And we all know what happens. We've seen the statistics. What happens when there's not a father in the family? What happens to the child? I mean, statistically, the child has high rates of depression, high rates of even suicide, of not succeeding at school. So it feels like we are the children of this. Australia are the children of this phenomena, and that we have lost our father, and we are.
Yep. And
there's nothing wrong with just having a mother, but in the objective reality, on the ontological view of a nation, you need a father. So why do you think, when did you first notice the Liberal Party kind of slipping up? Or has it been this slow march through the Liberal Party slowly losing their kind of fatherness and becoming this kind of, we call it soy boy in our culture, the soy boy of politics? When did you first notice that personally yourself?
Probably about 2010. So I came to the party late in waking up, but the human party, not the political party. I was presenting the science to various politicians, and I know a lot of people in the Labor Party agreed with me. I know a lot of people in the Liberal Party, overwhelming majority, agreed with me, but they're afraid to speak up, except for people, a few Liberals, but no one in the Labor Party. And I was so indoctrinated myself that I honestly thought John Howard was a good Prime Minister. In 2007, he got the boot, and in 2013, and he introduced the major climate and energy policies that are now destroying this country. He did that. And in 2013, in a major policy speech in London at the Global Warming Policy Foundation, John Howard said that on the topic of, when he was Prime Minister and introduced these heinous policies that are now destroying our energy grid in this country, he said it was all based on the science. That's what his government paraded. In 2013, 6 years after getting the boot, in London, which is 12,000 miles away from us here in Australia, no one heard him. He said that on the topic of climate science, I'm agnostic. He didn't have the science, yet he's destroying the country. And so that's when I went, because I thought he was a wonderful Prime Minister. That's when I realised there's really great problems here. But I started waking up about 2010, but that's when I really woke up in 2013. And so that's what's driven me in the Senate. And then what I've come to realise in the Senate is that there are very, very few policies that are based on data, based on hard facts, based on cold truth. They're basically based on bullshit, lies, looking after their mates, their donors, looking after vested interests, pushing the globalist agenda. And the globalist agenda is anti-human and contrary to the data. So we see policies right across the spectrum that are not based on data and that contradict the data. And when you point it out, there's just laughs. and they don't want to look at it, so they're just driven by ideology. That's when I started realising that there are things that are seriously wrong in this country. So coming back to that, that's why I detest working in the Senate, but that's why I also like working in the Senate, because we start to open people up. And some of the issues that we've been working on are starting to come home to roost. They're starting to come to us because we're based on data. You know, we've been chasing, for example, you talked about the Labor Party. In 2019, I became aware of Australia's largest wage theft scam ever, over $1.3 billion stolen from workers, with the unions, the employer, the mine owner, and the Fair Work Commission all having their role in scamming $1.3 billion worth of wages out of workers. The workers are supposed to have protection in union bosses. Supposed to have protection from the Fair Work Commission. If they fail, they're supposed to have protection from the Labor Party. The Labor Party is actively suppressing my work on this, and it's only now that it's starting to emerge. So the Liberal Party before that, under Morrison, tried to hide what I was doing because they're looking after the corporates. So who's looking after the worker? Just one nation. And so the roles have been reversed, and instead of the Parliament and the government looking after the people, they're stealing from the people. And they're just transferring wealth from the people, we the people, losing our money, to the globalist corporations. That's basically what's going on in this country.
Yeah, you mentioned climate change.
And by the way, we're making progress on that now. It's taken 6.5 years, but we're making progress on it. It's starting to unfurl.
Yeah, and how's that manifesting? How are you noticing? Do you want to give away any kind of hints on how you're seeing it actually progressing, or what kind of actions?
We pushed it for a while, and both parties ridiculed me. Both sides of politics ridiculed me for doing it. This can't happen, Senator Roberts. We're living in 2016, 2019 rather. And when it started to become serious, the Liberal Party gave me a sop. They said, we'll give you an inquiry into a review of the long service leave provisions, because this is not just about wage theft. This is about loss of basic entitlements, safety net, protections, long service leave, coal mines insurance, which is workers' compensation, leave provisions, basic rights. You know, we had companies threatening to sack people if they dare ask questions. I mean, this is so wrong in our country. We've had people crippled and no workers' compensation, and then finally getting pitiful amounts of workers' compensation from the New South Wales, for example, New South Wales state government workers' compensation scheme, which means the state taxpayers are subsidising some of the world's largest companies abusing their miners. So we got that long service leave investigation. Oh, and they found out, George, that Senator Roberts is absolutely correct. That's when it started to open up. And then they got voted out, and the Labor Party came in, and they were madly defending their biggest donor, the CFMEU, union bosses. And so bit by bit, we got more evidence. And we've had evidence all the way along, but we had someone come and join us in the battle who's got a lot of history with and success with dealing with union bosses and corrupt government. And now we've got the facts on the table, well and truly, and it's become too big to ignore. And now the Fair Work Ombudsman is involved, and this ally that's come to us and is looking after it all for us. He's now convinced that the Fair Work Ombudsman will do the job properly, because they've got no alternative with the evidence we've got. We've got miners from central Queensland and the Hunter Valley owed, in one case, $211,000. We've got miners ripped off for about $42,000 per year. Many ripped off for more than $30,000 per year. This is universal in the coal sector. And it's because Labor, Liberal, just all looked after their corporate mates, their union bosses. And we've got now the basic protections for the workers, the union bosses and the employers and the Fair Work Commission turning a blind eye and enabling it to happen. And that is representative of what so many things that are happening in this country. People, you know, Labor and Liberal Party don't give a damn about immigration. We've been working on it for 4 years, mass immigration. They don't give a damn about it. Until we've been working on it for 4 years, and the election campaign, it became an issue. But they didn't talk about the policies that we had. They didn't talk about the policies, specific hard numbers driving their immigration policies. They just said, oh, we'll cut it. That's all they said. So they recognise it's real. And Anthony Albanese, on the weekend, on Sunday, he and his ministers criticised the people who marched in Australia. They don't get it. They don't get it that the marchers marched to restore their country. The marchers were called March for Australia, to restore Australia. And then Albanese suddenly realised on Monday that he'd made a hell of a mistake, because and then he started walking back the anti-marcher rhetoric. So we're starting to get signs that we're getting through. It's taken us 4 years on that, and 6 years on the wage scam, 4 years on the mass immigration rort that's destroying housing in this country. But there are so many things that we can talk about when it comes to mass immigration and the negative impact on our country. So if you want to go there, I'm happy to go there, whatever you like.
Yeah, I'm just curious around mass immigration being used as almost like a Bandaid effect to kind of hide the errors of government policy. Particularly, with COVID, there was a massive production drop. I mean, I think essentially it's actually productivity is basically non-existent in this country. We used to, as I said before off camera, I said Australia used to have the same economic diversity as some European nations back in the 60s, and now we have the same economic diversity as Mongolia. With the heart and soul of innovation has been stripped out of Australia. I was talking to a person last night whose family comes from the fisheries, and they were telling me that even just simple things, for example, like
Is that Port
power
Lincoln?
bills. Oh, I don't want to say names, but yeah, in the Port Lincoln area. But they were telling me, look, things like power bills, like they have a close relationship with the American fisheries. So the American fisheries the way the American fisheries are looked after by their government is quite impressive. They don't barely pay power. Everything is very cheap. It's the whole system is set up to empower the American fisheries to do the very best job. And these American fisheries are the people who run these boats, who go and catch the fish, are some of the most proudest Americans. They have all their boats are named the American Lady or the Washington Lady. Like, they have the American flags, and the Australian fisheries don't even have Australian flags. My friend actually went and said, "Screw it, I'm going to buy some flags and put it on the boats." And just that little gesture, apparently the crew were lit up. The fisheries, these Australian fisheries were lit up just by seeing the flag itself. Just gave such an immense power. But he said, look, in Australia, we are being choked. We have to pay so many bills, and they have to put basically their life on the line just to innovate. And when you're doing this to your people and you cut productivity, you cut innovation, you only give the manifestation chance of immigration as the only way forward. Because if you're killing your productivity, then people aren't going to take the risk, and people are just left almost essentially as these work slaves. They're not. Why would an entrepreneur want to work in Australia when they could just go somewhere else like America and fulfill their dreams? And that's why I believe a huge part of mass immigration is, well, we've put so much red tape around innovation and business here. We've got so little productivity. The only option really now is mass immigration, because without mass immigration, the entire economy would go into a 10 to 20 year depression in this country. It would collapse the country, essentially. So they've kind of forced our hand into this radical immigration approach. And it is, when talking about globalists, we're seeing this across the world. We're seeing this in England. I mean, it's a bit different in Europe, because Europe has the Middle East at their doorstep. So it's very easy for someone just to jump on a boat and get to England, for example, off the channel. And you see it. You see the videos of all these military-aged men coming into the beaches of England or Spain, jumping off the boats right in front of holiday goers. And basically, it's just basically an invasion of Europe. Australia's quite lucky, but we have our own problems here. We have planes, and we're flying everyone over. And this is something that people really haven't thought about yet. What happens? A lot of these jobs, a lot of these immigrants coming here, what kind of jobs are they doing? They're doing service-based jobs. The Uber Eats, the Uber drivers. In 5 to 10 years, these jobs won't exist anymore. The way AI is going, the way technology is going, you won't need a driver to deliver your food. They're going to have drones. They're going to have robots that can deliver food to your house. okay, when that happens in say 5, 10 years, what happens to these 1.5, 2 million people they've brought in? What jobs will they do? What will
Well,
they do?
you have raised so many points, and we started on productivity. Productivity is wonderful. Increasing productivity is wonderful. It's absolutely essential. It's what drives our standard of living, lowers our cost of living, raises our standard of living, and it drives human progress. And the single most important factor driving productivity is humans' care for other humans. Making a product that better meets people's needs and getting a superior product. The second biggest thing, and that's also involved in that, is human creativity. We are just absolutely wonderful beings, humans. We are the superior species on our planet, and I have great pride in being a human. We have love, we have care for each other. I mean, George, the fact that you are here demonstrates that someone cared for you, because when a mare drops a foal, the foal stumbles around awkwardly on spindly legs for about 20 minutes, gets up and starts trotting, and then comes over and suckles on its mum, and away it goes. And then in 3 months' time it starts eating grass, and it's cantering and galloping and moving with the whole herd. That's it. From there on it's just putting on weight and getting experience. With you and me, we were helpless, fragile creatures for years, literally for years. And the fact that someone cared for you is obvious because you're here. So love, care, and the other trait with humans is reason. They make us unique. Sure, horses love their offspring, but it's not the same kind of love. It's nurturing kind of love with horses and animals. Ours is real love. It's spiritual love. It's a deep connection. So there's that love, the care, and the reason in humans. Only we can reason. So we developed then better ways of meeting your needs, for example, and they're willing to pay me for developing those better ways, and you're going to give me money for that. And so what I've got to do is develop ways of improving the service I provide. I'm not talking about being a politician. I'm talking about being an entrepreneur. And then other people say, oh, Malcolm's got the market cornered. They jump into the market and they start developing better ways of doing things. And then I have to come back and improve my productivity. And productivity lowers prices of goods and services. So what I have to do is come up with ways of improving productivity. And then you're even happier because of this competition. It's not cutthroat competition. It's quite often, without government involvement, it is respectful competition. It's genuine competition. And you're sitting back as a customer smiling because I'm competing with everyone else to get your money and to provide you a service. And then the government gets involved and it looks after its mates, and I get driven out of business. So productivity, let's come back to the basics. Productivity is about producing more with less. Now, some people used to think high productivity meant screwing the workers, paying them less money, driving them into the ground, sacrificing safety, sacrificing retirement. That is a terrible way of raising productivity, because it might get you short-term benefits, but it kills your business long-term. That's proven time and time again. So productivity was a dirty word in Australia because of the misunderstanding. And lo and behold, it was two Labor politicians, Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, that came along and raised productivity by converting it to being a very, very positive thing. And that turned the country around. So productivity is absolutely essential, providing you get it the right way, not by exploiting workers, but by making work easier, making work safer, making work simpler, and enabling people to contribute their ideas. Productivity comes back, above all, to good management, good leadership, and giving workers a fair go and a fair share. So productivity is absolutely essential. And when you look at what happened that was driving our productivity high, we had high productivity in this country. It was the relentless decrease in real prices of energy. They were getting cheaper, and energy was getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, whether it be petrol, whether it be electricity. Australia had the cheapest electricity in the world, bar none. Now we've got the most expensive electricity in the world, apart from some European countries. We've got the same bloody resources, but we can't use them here for generating cheap coal-fired power, environmentally friendly, environmentally responsible cheap coal power. But we can send our resources to China, where they can convert it into cheap energy. And we sell. I mean, we produce coal at some of the best mines in the world. We take the coal out of the mine and put it into the power station, right on the mine mouth. No transport costs, nothing. And we sell our power for 26 to 33 cents a kilowatt hour. That same coal is shipped by train to a port. It's loaded at a port onto a ship. It's stored and then loaded, stockpiled, which involves handling, which involves money. Transshipped on a ship thousands of kilometres to a port in China or Korea or Japan or Singapore or Indonesia. And there it's offloaded, which costs money. It's stockpiled. It's put on a train to a power station a few hundred kilometres inland in China. And the Chinese sell it at 12 cents a kilowatt hour when you look at the exchange rate. That's a half to a third of the price here in this country. And then we wonder why our manufacturing is going to China, because it used to be that the biggest cost component of manufacturing 30 years ago was labour. Now it's electricity or gas. And so we are driving ourselves out of business. We not only can't have the benefits of wonderful coal-fired power, which is still the cheapest in the world, apart from some hydro installations, but we ship our manufacturing overseas, we ship our jobs overseas. And George, you mentioned a point a little while ago. About 30, 40 years ago, we were independent on almost everything. We made our manufacturing equipment, we made our steel and tool dies, made our steel tools, which are you've got to have if you want to have a vibrant manufacturing sector. We exported fish overseas. We had canneries in major coasts. Sydney had many canneries, fish canneries. We had a vibrant fishing industry, which you touched on, trawlers all up and down the East Coast. Now what's happened is that they have put restrictions on our manufacturing through the electricity prices, and we've destroyed our manufacturing bases. So who the hell is going to produce the goods we need if we get an embargo around us by China, for example, or produce our manufactured goods? And we're losing our independence. But we're also losing our independence when it comes to food, of all things. We used to have food in abundance. We have the world's largest continental shelf fishing zone, the world's largest zone. Yet we import 3/4 of the seafood we eat. And we've got a tiny population. We should be not only feeding ourselves, but exporting it all over the country, all over the world. Now, what's happened is that the United Nations has come in and said, well, we're killing the fish, fishing the source of our fish, the fish stocks, which is complete bullshit. Walter Stark, who's a marine biologist with extensive experience, is an American who's now living in Australia. He's been all over the world looking at reefs and managing reefs, and he says that the sustainable catch per square kilometre per year in our Great Barrier Reef is 1,500 kilograms per year per square kilometre. You know what the actual catch is? 0.9 kilograms. 0.9. Wow. We are not running out of fish. Where do we import a lot of our seafood from? China, which has 63 times the population we have. I think that's the last number I calculated. And they've got a tiny coastline compared with ours. Where's the second biggest import source for us? Thailand, which is a tiny coastline and 3 times our population. So this is all bullshit. But what happens is you get the UN saying we need to comply with their dictates, which they've got no power over us at all. It's only when the dopey bastards in Canberra start regulating, and the state government start regulating our fishing zones to shut down fishers so that their productivity is destroyed. And I'm not going to repeat it because you said it so well. It kills the incentive to go fishing, it kills the incentive to invest in a trawler, and then the regulations they've got to put up with are so damn restrictive, they make you sick. You know, fishermen have just retired. Our trawler fleet is basically handicapped now. And then you get another insidious, vile group called World Wildlife Fund, WWF. They come in and they buy up fishing licenses in the Gulf of Carpentaria. And what are they? And they've got millionaires and billionaires pushing this. And then they buy the fishing zone and they shut it down. No one can fish it. And then you get the World Wildlife Fund destroying the cattle industry in America, destroying the cattle industry in Australia. This is our food source. This is our protein source. And they want to shut it down. They're out to cripple They're out to cripple us. So, we've got a situation where our fishermen see on the northeast edge of our fishing zones, of our economic zone, national economic zone, that we've got yellowfin tuna coming in and swimming through. The yellowfin tuna can't be caught in our fishing zone, in our economic zone. But as soon as they escape into Papua New Guinea, the Asian fishermen can come down and just do whatever they want with them. So we're paying more for fish than we need to. But you also talked about something else, and that is the GDP per capita, the gross domestic product per capita. That is the real measure of economic health and your economy, GDP per person. But what is officially used is GDP itself, the GDP for the whole country. And so when GDP per capita has been negative now for at least 2 years, I think it's 8 quarters, maybe 9 quarters, we are in a recession. But because they flood the joint with mass migration, we lift the gross domestic product figure and we have no recession, just barely. But when you actually, so what it means is that we're growing the pie, but we're getting less of a slice per person. Less of a slice per person because it's being shared with many more people. And many of the new people coming in recent times, they're not the hardworking migrants from Greece, not the hardworking migrants from China who've been with us ever since the country, before country started, before a federation in 1901. But the Europeans came here, and they came out here and rolled up their sleeves. The Italians went to North Queensland and bought sugarcane farms, and what they did was they would get a little group. They'd 5 of them. They'd work hard cutting cane. They'd pool their earnings, and they'd buy a farm, and then they'd work for the next farm and the next farm until all 5 are set up. The hard-working Italians. We brought in people like that who had to meet rigorous requirements. Nowadays, the requirements are turn up here, get welfare, send drugs home, medications home on the PBS system. It's just that's what's destroying our country. But it's done to hide the negative per capita GDP. And what's happening is with more mass migration, it's driving down the increase in wages. So it's suppressing wages, and that's why it's done as well, because the corporates control the bloody government, and so it's the government's role. There are 3 roles, George, for government: protect life, protect property, protect freedom, because freedom is the hallmark for human progress. And during COVID, which you raised a little while ago, I'm happy to talk about that too. During COVID, they killed people. It was homicide, tens of thousands of people. And they stole property, and they killed freedom. So this is what's going on in our country. So the government is not working for us. They're working for for Australia's biggest wealth transfer, which is $18 billion from we the people to Big Pharma. I mean, all over the place. And that's what's going on. The property rights, John Howard's government, to comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol on climate and energy, they stole farmers' property rights. To a true Liberal Party, there's nothing more sacrosanct than secure property rights. So, and it's essential for responsibility, essential for progress, is secure property rights, and they're destroying it. So that they've killed freedom, killed property rights, and they're killing people, and these things are intentional, or at least done willfully or in a willfully negligent way. So government is out of control here, and where do you stop? With the Constitution, we have got a wonderful Constitution. And we are not a monarchy. We are a constitutional monarchy. We are basically a republic already. The monarch in a monarchy, the monarch rules over people. In a constitutional monarchy, the monarch serves the Constitution. Our supreme governing entity is the Constitution. It's a constitution. That makes us a republic, ruled by laws. And in our Constitution, the people have the most power. But what's happened in this country, instead of the government reporting to the people, we have the people serving the government. And so what we've got to do is get people active again, because in a democracy, you need people active, you need citizens active, holding politicians accountable, not just at the ballot, the election booth, but every day in between, holding them accountable. And what we've got is the government running roughshod over us on behalf of corporations and vested interests like union bosses. one of maybe there's just so much you can talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot happening, and this is why, for example, bringing up quickly the 13th of September, it seems like the Freedom Group has secured the Sydney Harbour Bridge for a massive protest that's anti-government corruption, anti-digital ID, anti-mass immigration, anti all the things that we've just spoken of today. The Sydney Harbour Bridge has been used things for like LGBTQ, things for like the Palestine protests, for climate change. How do you feel seeing, for a very long time, the bridge going to be used for something that's actually about our own nation? Does that excite you, or are you still skeptical on what this movement can do?
Well, it seems to be a grassroots movement, George, so I'm very excited by that. We'll see who the ultimate organisers are before I endorse it, but I'm very, very excited. And I think it reflects that the people have been recognised at last, that the government's realised this is not a fly-by-night outfit, a couple of conspiracy theorists. That's what they labelled us.
Yep.
This is real Aussies with a genuine beef, and they better do something about it. So that's wonderful to see. But, there's something else I come back to, and that is responsibility. The governments have got very little responsibility to the people in this country. That's why they're off the hook, and that's why they're running rampant. In Switzerland and some other countries, they have citizens-initiated referendum. It's been a policy of One Nation for decades to have a citizens-initiated referendum. And one of the benefits of that is, well, I'll tell you what it is. You probably already know, but some of your viewers might not. If there's a law that the government passes that people don't like, and there are many of them, then by developing a petition, I think it's for a very low percentage of people, 2%, 5%, whatever, it varies around the world. If you get enough signatures, then they have a referendum to say whether or not the people want the law or not. And if the people say go to hell with that law, the law is axed, it's done, that's it, gone. And if there's an incumbent politician or an officer like a governor in some states in the United States, or a prime minister or a president, they can have a recall election, which means do we value this person? No, we don't. Get rid of him or her. And I know a friend of mine. When I was in my 20s, she was in her 60s. She never struck me as being interested in politics. She was pretty naive. She went to Switzerland and she came back, and I said, Auntie Betty, what did you think of Switzerland? Expecting her to tell me, beautiful scenery, wonderful people, friendly people, very disciplined, very tidy, orderly, civilised place. And you know what she said, George? She said, the politicians are responsible. And I went, what? The politicians are responsible. We need to have citizens-initiated referendum here. We need to have people actively involved and hold the bastards accountable.
Moving into that, actually, this is a good segue into solutions. If you had a magic wand, or you had the ability to, let's say, you could manifest whatever you wanted to kind of create solutions immediately to unravel the mess we're in right now, what would you want to see happen? How would you heal the country?
Well, the thing I would do most of all is I would change our citizens from being passive to active, because a democracy is generally so successful because human progress flourishes when there's freedom, and then eventually the people get fat and sloppy and lazy, and they don't hold the governments accountable, and then they become passive, not active. And then what happens is the government realises that, and it bullies, intimidates the people, takes them for granted. So what I would do is change the current Australian, quite frankly, Western democracies have become filled with sheep, and the sheep are in our parliaments as well. But once the people start waking up and start being wolves and start being active, then you change the politicians, and your politicians start serving the country. So that's the single most important thing that I would change. I would help the people to be active. So how are we doing that? We're educating people. What you're doing is helping that, because people are waking up around the country now. They're realising that our drones in Canberra, our sheep in Canberra, are just pushing the globalist agenda. None of this bullshit from the United Nations or World Economic Forum has any effect on our country until it's made into law within our parliament. And so it's the dopes in Canberra that are pushing this rubbish. So that's what I would do. I'd change the people to be more active, to be active.
So it always comes down to, and that's kind of poetic in a sense, because it's true. In life, I find that whenever there is a challenge, it always comes down to personal responsibility. It's in all of us, and what you do in your own personal responsibility is a reflection to humanity itself. You know, we're all connected. We all, you know, spiritually connected in a sense. So if we're not all coordinating and activated and passionate about this nation, then what nation do we really have? You know, if we are pacified individuals, we're left with nothing. And you're right. Of course, the government, we should expect, I mean, it should be in the back of the mind, always expect governance. I mean, you've probably looked into elite theory before, but elite theory suggests that at all moments in life, anyone that has power, even good people who have power, will always take advantage of the sheep. And it's just inside of human nature, essentially. So it does require us sheep, we can call ourselves the sheep, to become almost like rams and get our horns out and start ramming some things, you know. And we need to start getting out there and making a positive difference. And I do, actually, I really appreciate you kind of speaking about Australia as a constitutional, almost like a constitutional republic, similar to what the US have. Because, yeah, you're right, we do have a lot of power here. I don't think the people of Australia realise how much constitutional power they really have. And, you know, a great movie, what was it? Castle. Was it Castle?
Yeah.
The old movie in the 1980s kind of showcased, you know, the power that we do have. And it also goes to show, you're right, art, the ability to make content, the ability to communicate, the ability to use art to help educate people in a way. And if that's through social media or if that's through music or through a movie, I think the media have had a huge role in doing this. You've seen the media lately and the way they talk, even with the recent announcement with the 13th of September protest. What did they say? They said, oh, the police are exhausted. They're tired of this. Why haven't they been tired for the last 2 years from the constant protests that we've seen across Australia with other protests? They're only tired when it comes to nation building. So you're right. There is this anti-human, almost like an anti-human thread sewn into the current media. And I feel like it is up to the independent journalist, the independent artist. The artists need to become activated. The true artists of this world, the true artists of the Western civilization need to be activated again. And art has been such an important part. We've seen it in the Renaissance period, literally drew us out of darkness from a place of complete restriction to a place of pure joy and a pure intelligence. And God, I think God wants us to be intelligent beings. God wants us to be curious. God wants us to be having fun and innovating. And that's why when people ask me, George, do you not feel hopeless? I'm like, no, because I know deep down the human spirit is innovative. And this time for us as a challenge really is some of the best times to be alive, because it's when humans are under extreme pressure and extreme challenge. That's when you see the best of humanity. That's when you actually see what humans truly are. And it's spoken about in ancient texts, but ancient are very, very extraordinary. So,
Yep.
to be honest, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. I'm full of hope, and I hope people in Parliament also feel that sentiment, that no matter how bad these politicians are, no matter how bad Liberal or Labor behave, the human spirit will always win. And especially having senators like you and others in Parliament driving that spirit, I'm very hopeful. And I don't want my audience or your constituents to feel like they're not in that same space. We should be very hopeful. This is a great time to be alive.
We've talked about the anti-human scam being the biggest, most powerful scam going, bigger than the money fraud, bigger than the climate fraud, the COVID fraud. But I'm also very, very pro-human. And I think I said that in my first speech. I've certainly said it in the Senate many, many times. I am bloody proud to be a human. Very, very proud to be a human. We are the only species capable of love, real care and reason. We have got everything going for us. We are wonderful creatures. Most humans are absolutely wonderful, and those who are not need to be treated with compassion and some discipline and some firmness. But I'm not talking about being soft. I'm talking about but treated with compassion, because they're acting out of ego and they're in a lot of pain. So when you see a bully, they're usually in a lot of pain. But I remember when I graduated from university with an honours degree in mining engineering, I decided I better go and learn something. So I worked as a coalface miner, mostly underground, one open cut mine, mostly underground, different mines around the country. Then I worked overseas, and I developed a very healthy respect for humans. My mother and father taught me that anyway, and it didn't matter whether I was in India, mixing with Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, atheists, Sikhs. It didn't matter if I was there. People are lovely. People are wonderful. Sure, we've got some ill people. We've got some people who want to screw us at times, but that's acting out of ego. Again, most people are absolutely wonderful, and the politicians enter the parliament with the right feeling, right care, but they soon get disrupted and corralled and suppressed by the systems in the place, and they soon get converted. But what I was getting to was you mentioned about God, and thank you for doing that. God created us in His image. God created us in His image. So He's not a human sitting up in a cloud. I'm not saying that, but the real human at our heart is in God's image, and that's why Christianity is so powerful. But I can remember being sent to a mine that had a troubled industrial relations situation. Every night when I stayed back late, every night the evening shift would come to work, and when I first arrived, and they'd have a stop work meeting because they were not informed by the management. They weren't treated with respect, and I thought, this is crazy. But anyway, I realised that wasn't their fault, that was the management's fault, and so we started building better systems to manage the place. I went underground. The previous manager didn't go underground much. I went underground, and when people whinged at me and bitched and moaned, I didn't take that personally. I took that as being truthful and having a gripe, because these people want to work. They want to go home after 8 hours and be proud of what they've done. They want to contribute. I mean, coal miners, they're not just going down the mine, and I told them this, they're not just going down the mine to dig up some black rock and go home. They're digging energy that goes into a power station that keeps the lights on at night, that builds steel. And steel is in every aspect of our life. Food, harvesting, transport, everything is either touched and made by steel or consists of steel. So buildings are made with steel. Steel implements everywhere. Surgeons use steel implements. So coal miners are absolutely essential, and that really pisses me off because the governments are trying to shut it down. But one night I was walking home after about 18 months, and I'm walking to my car in the car park, and I thought, why am I feeling so happy? And I turned around and saw the massive coal stockpiles, record coal production, record safety figures, and I thought, that's not it. What I was really very, very pleased with and happy about was the fact that evening shift came to work and just went straight down the mine. And they'd been doing that for the last 12 months, because they want to contribute, and there's too much bullshit that's stopping people at work, because most people don't want to waste their time at work. But if they're teachers, they want to go to school and have an impact instead of teaching this gender bullshit, instead of talking about the woke ideologies. Another thing I learnt 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, was I was reading a book, and all of a sudden I went, hang on, this left versus right is crap. It's a fabrication, it's a figment. So I rarely use the term left or right. I sometimes use it in public if I'm in a hurry because people identify with it. But there's no such thing as left and right. It's control versus freedom. That's the real issue, and that's the issue within each of us. That's the issue within our families. That's the issue between families, between groups. It's the issue within clubs. People want to dominate and take over when they're directors. It's the issue at work. It's the issue between nations, fighting nations. But it's control versus freedom. And generally speaking, the control side has been the socialists and the communists. Every major mass murderer in the previous century, Hitler, Stalin, Chairman Mao, Pol Pot, were all from the control side of politics. They wanted to suppress people and control people. And that was their way of looking after their mates and transferring wealth from we the people who are working and transferring it to their mates. When you have the freedom side, then you get everyone lifting everyone up, and that's what we need to get back to. And our governments, what's really insidious, George, is that if I hold a gun to your head, everyone watching knows that I'm in control of you. But if I take you away you're still in your family, but I take you away from your family and indoctrinate you at school, indoctrinate you 100% of the time through advertising, through government dictates. You don't even know that I'm controlling you. And so the system just perpetuates. And that's what we've got at the moment. Look at COVID. Morrison told us every night for about 2 weeks, he said there are no vaccine mandates in this country. The bastard bought the vaccines. They're not vaccines, they're injections. He bought them, he gave them to the states, indemnified the states. He gave the states access to the health data, which is the only way they could enforce the mandates. And then the states at the National Cabinet, which is another furphy, the National Cabinet said that they put in place the vaccine mandates at the states because of the National Cabinet, which Morrison initiated, which Morrison led. And then to top it off, if you go behind the scenes, you find that the federal government has vaccine mandates itself. While Morrison was saying that, they had vaccine mandates in the Australian Defence Forces, in the Australian Electoral Commission, in the Australian Federal Police. Insidious, inhuman, to inject something that's not even tested properly into someone's body, to force them, if they want their kids to be fed and they disagree with the injection, tough shit, they're going to get it because they want to keep their kids alive and keep their kids fed. I mean, this is how bad our government has got in this country. And Labor, I think the worst government we've had in the country because of the damage I worked out later was the Howard Liberal National Government. But this Albanese government's trying to catch them. They're doing such a terrible job. It's all about control, but it's hidden. Sorry about the rant, but I
appreciate it. Because it's true. Like what you're speaking the truth, and it's bringing me much joy, and not in like a sinister way. It's just good to hear someone like you speaking these things because you don't hear it enough. And you're right. It is up to educating the people because, if everyone knew the things that you could speak of passionately like this, it would give people the courage to do that. Because that's the thing. In Australia, we have a very silent majority, or we kind of like to just kind of focus on the footy, or we don't want to focus on it too much. It's I'm not sure why. Maybe it's in our British roots, whatever it is.
George is actually in America too, and I've lived and worked in America for about 5 years and studied there, and I've travelled through all 50 states, and what a wonderful country that was. But it's been wrecked in the last 30 years under Obama, Clinton, Bush, both Bushes. The last decent president they had was before Trump was Reagan, and Reagan gave people some hope. When I arrived in America, it was just before the election, and then Reagan took over in January. Then the following year, I arrived in August. He took over in January, and that country. When I arrived, I'd read so much about America. Just the suppression of people, but America flourished because people were free. It was one of the best expressions of human spirit ever to have grace. It was recognised as a noble experiment, the shining light on the hill. And when I arrived in America under Jimmy Carter, the Americans had hostages in Iran. Remember the embassy hostages, and their attempt to get them was a bit of a disaster. When I arrived in America, I saw the Americans walking around with their chins on their chest, and I'm thinking, what is the matter with you people? And then I realised Vietnam was, an embarrassment. Watergate was an embarrassment. The government had become an embarrassment. And Reagan came in and just picked the whole country up and said, get on with it. And he liberated that country. And then the globalists took over again after he left power at the end of his term. With Bush and then Clinton and then Bush again, then Obama. What a disgrace. So what I'm saying is that leadership is important. We have got the most resources per person in the world, bar no other country. We are the world's largest exporters of energy. Exporters, not users, exporters. And we have got a climate that is essential for abundance. We can grow things all through the year, and we can grow them very, very with high productivity. We've got wonderful soils. We've got wonderful water resources, but we don't use them properly. We don't harness them properly. So we've got wonderful resources. We've got a wonderful population. It's being destroyed in terms of the indoctrination at the schools, being flooded with migrants in mass migration. And That's diluting our impact. But we have got a wonderful resource in this country. The only thing we're missing, George, is the leadership.
Yeah.
And who's responsible for the leadership? The politicians. But who's ultimately responsible? The people. You need to get on our asses and hold us accountable.
Yeah, you're right. It is up to us to vote correctly and say enough is enough. I was shocked with Labor's win, to be honest, the manner of it, but also I wasn't shocked because Peter Dutton just didn't seem up to it. He, the left were criticising him for being too much like Trump, but I don't think he was anything like Trump. He was if he's like Trump, then I have no idea how they won that narrative. It just didn't make sense to me. Peter Dutton was kind of like a wet rag, if anything. Unfortunately, he should have unleashed his true self if he really wanted to win that election. But it just seemed like he was holding back and making all the wrong moves. It almost seemed coordinated how badly and poorly it is. And now with the current leadership, Susan, she doesn't fill me with any confidence. It seems more of the same thing. It really does feel like the Liberal Party is rotten, almost broken, and I'm not sure how they're going to fix themselves because it almost does seem like a new party or a party has to really step up and grab this opportunity to really become the other force that we require. So I think if Australians are listening, it's time to really have some profound thoughts about that and go, is this really what you want forever? Do you really want this Liberal Labor uni emulsion party that's the same thing, doing the same thing over and over again, feeding more and more power to the globalists, giving more pandemic treaties away, giving more of our resources away, selling more of our lands to other countries who ban the Australian flag in Parliament? What a crazy thing to see. The Greens and what they did recently, how did that make you feel, seeing the Australian flag and the way they treated Jacinta Price in that moment?
Well, they treated Pauline Hanson in a far worse way. So it's bad enough treating Nampa Jimpa Price the way they did, then they treated Pauline Hanson badly. So, look, I'm disgusted with the Greens. The Greens are the foot soldiers of the globalists. They introduced the policies, the climate fraud, for example, the gender bending, the woke ideology. The Greens introduced that. The disciples, the foot soldiers of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And then the Labor Party starts adopting them because they're afraid of losing votes for the sake of brevity, the left side of politics, the control side of politics. And then the Liberals are afraid of losing votes because of the media, another big entity in this scenario. So the Liberals start adopting the policies, and that's why you end up with Liberal and Labor identical policies. There's no difference apart from a little bit of tinkering around the edges on window dressing. There's no difference between those policies. And then what you have is the role of the media, George, because the media is largely owned by globalists. I know we've got a big showing in Murdoch. And I'm not sure about Murdoch there. I think Murdoch's number one interest is Murdoch, but he's the only one who gives the freedom side of politics a run in this country, with Adam Crichton, for example, on COVID, Chris Kenny on COVID, Chris Kenny on energy, Adam Crichton on energy, Graham Lloyd on energy, and there's someone else I'm missing too who's very good on energy. But they're the only ones. But apart from that, you've got the ABC setting the agenda, and you've got the SBS setting the agenda, taxpayer funded, and that's what I've noticed so much. You know, when I was working as a volunteer against exposing this climate fraud, here am I expending my money, my wife's and my family's money, going around the country at my expense, and I'm fighting the bloody ABC and the government using taxpayer money, telling lies about climate, telling lies about COVID, pushing the globalist agenda. So the media is owned by the same large corporations generally around the world that own Hollywood. And Hollywood has become an indoctrination centre. Not just now. It was doing that during the Second World War, pushing out propaganda. Now the propaganda is much more subtle, and it's insidious. What's the word? Yeah, it's much more subtle. But people don't realise it's propaganda. But many Hollywood movies are just propaganda, well veiled. Coming back to Peter Dutton, I think Pauline knows him better than I do, so I never found a problem with Peter Dutton. But he's not so much weak as his party was tearing him in different directions. They did the same to Abbott. When you get a stronger conservative, true conservative like Abbott, and I think like Dutton, then the left wing, the control side of politics in the Liberal Party tears them, keeps them apart, and they can't step out of line too far. You know, Tony Abbott, I believe, if he'd been given a second chance, I think he would have been great, because he recognised that he didn't fulfil his true self as Prime Minister. But there is something else. You know, the Voice was a defeat. The Voice referendum was a defeat for Anthony Albanese. A huge, embarrassing defeat. And by the way, there was only one jurisdiction in the country that voted for the Voice, and that was the ACT, which tells us something very, very sad about our bureaucrats and the way our country is run. Every other state resoundingly defeated the Voice, despite hundreds of millions of dollars from corporations, from government, taxpayers, funding the pro-Voice side. The people woke up that this is just a vibe, it was just bullshit, and they voted against it. Queensland, almost 70% against. And that gives us hope, gives us encouragement. But the other thing that gives us hope is that about 40 years ago, 95% of people gave their first preference in an election, federal election, to the Liberal and Labor parties. 95%. It's now at 66%, and it's falling at a steady trend. We're getting more independents, more small parties. One Nation has been bashed and bashed and bashed. The Greens got a lovely free ride through the media. They got a lovely free ride through the parliament. They're now part of the communist government, the communist coalition with Labor Party. They now run the country. One Nation, on the other hand, got belted for being labelled. We got a leader put in jail. We got the party infiltrated by members of the Labor Party and Liberal Party to destroy us. Why did they do that? Because we were such a threat. I mean, Pauline, in the first state election, she contested as a party, got 23% of the vote, and both Labor and Liberals crapped themselves. And they had to destroy us. They colluded to destroy us. And so that's the only real alternative now. We're the only party capable of getting senators into the Senate. So what we're seeing now is the last election was the first time that One Nation has not been ridiculed, smashed, torn apart by both Labor and Liberal. They now respect us, and we doubled our number of MPs in the Senate, and our vote increased dramatically, and the trend is increasing. So there is hope for people, that more and more people are waking up and voting for minor parties, small parties, and so we need to get more minor parties, particularly One Nation, into the parliament so that we can express the voice of the people.
Yeah, essentially, there are some people who are worried that no matter who goes into power, that One Nation or whatever, once they get into true power, will this machine work its hands and kind of... you've already mentioned it and alluded to others trying to come inside One Nation and destroy it from within. Do you see hope in that not happening if One Nation gets to that level of true power?
Very, very definitely. But I have enormous hope and faith that we will, because Pauline left the Liberal Party, and she will not go into a coalition with the Liberals. She will not do that. She'll welcome anybody who meets our standards from the Liberal Party to come and join us, and the National Party. And the National Party might as well join us, because they're copying our policies. We've forced them into starting to abandon some of the Liberal National Coalition's policies. So we're having a huge impact. But ultimately, in 10 years, 20 years' time, I can't guarantee what will happen in politics. No one can. The people are the best, and the One Nation members are getting more involved, and we're starting to have... We've had branches at the state level. We're now having branches at the local electorate level, the federal electorate level, George. And, Pauline had branches at the start of the party in 1998, but they were infiltrated by Labor and Liberal and destroyed from within. So she's been sceptical of having branches ever since. But now she realises we're of a sufficient size and sufficient momentum that we can have branches, and so she's bringing them back, and we've got grassroots movement. So it'll be up to them. Just like the Liberals have gone to sleep, the grassroots members, they're now putting up with woke bastards taking over their party. If woke people take over One Nation, that's the end of One Nation. But it's up to the people and the members of One Nation. But I think the ideals, people are realising there's got to be a change in Australian politics. There's got to be a change, and we have real people with life experience in the party, and that's demonstrated. Some of our candidates in the past have been very, very raw. We're giving them more training on how to present themselves, but not how to be themselves. We want real people in our party, and that's the appeal of One Nation. We say what the people are thinking. When we don't sanitise ourselves, sanitise what we say. We say it raw and rough and ready, and we make decisions based on hard data. The other parties don't do that. They ignore the data, contradict the data. So what I'm really saying is One Nation's the only party at the moment that is capable of really governing for the people. Whether we continue doing that in 10, 20, 30 years, that's up to the members of the party, that's up to the party, and it's up to the people of Australia.
That's all right. I appreciate the honesty, because it does take courage to be honest and speak from I. That was kind of one of the things I wanted to do. I'm trying to implement more coming from the I, speaking of like, I feel like this, I feel like that.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like when you speak from the heart, you can connect to the people of Australia, not just connect to the people of Australia, you can resonate. And that's the thing about these fringe groups we're seeing with the rise of the far right groups and the rise of the far left, which have been around for a long time now. Their message doesn't truly resonate with the nation, and they become almost like a cult. And, my approach is always, there's a very fascinating guy called Brian. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast. No. And he managed to shut down over, I think, you might need to fact check me, but this is just from memory, over 100 or 150 KKK groups in the America. And you know how he did it? He's a big black African-American man. He became friends with them. And then once they became friends of him, it was hard. He risked his life many times. Eventually, they realized the error of their message and how it didn't resonate, and they shut down their institutions. And he was responsible for the biggest collapse of KKK in the history of America just by becoming friends with them.
And doesn't that speak volumes about the innate care for other humans within even the KKK? Because once a black man with courage comes along and shows the reality that black men are no different from white men apart from the colour of their skin, we've all got red blood going through our veins. I can't get over the fact that people can't see that. You cut a black man, cut a white man, got the same colour blood, same types of blood. We can donate blood to each other. So the white members of the Ku Klux Klan, presumably they were white, could see the reality and then drop their hate, drop their control tendency. And so care really does cross between the barrier from Malcolm doesn't end here. The barrier ends wherever my thoughts end. And we don't see with our eyes, we see with our mind. So some people see a black man, some people see a human. So some people see a white man, some people see a human. So it's all up to, we don't see with our eyes, we don't hear with our ears, we see and hear with our brain, because it's the brain that takes the signals and has the prejudice locked in from when we're 6 years of age, and it's up to us to work our way out of that prison. The only person who puts a prison on me is me. That's it. End of story.
Yeah. No, it's a strong message, and it's true. And it all ties back to the kind of, I guess, the messaging from this interview we've had is it's ultimately down to self-responsibility, self-individuality, the ability to be able to perceive and understand and motivate and actually do the actions required. And it's up to the government to stop putting restrictions on us, to stop restricting innovation, and allow the human spirit to do its thing and to trust the human spirit to do its thing. That's,
Yep.
that's kind of I hope that's what people get from my interview.
You mentioned the R word, responsibility. That is essential for freedom. If people don't take responsibility, they're trapped within the patterns they built between birth and sex, trapped within the patterns of someone else. My wife and I did a major course which started us each on our journeys to understand ourselves individually and as a couple, called the Hoffman process, the Hoffman quadrinity process. And it takes people through various modalities back. Some people disappear into the womb, not literally, of course, but they start getting memories from what formed them in the womb. Certainly, we all had memories from early childhood and later childhood which formed us. And what it shows is that until we understand who we really are and what motivates us, we react. What we need to be able to do is to be able to choose our response. And Viktor Frankl, in the very well-known book Man's Search for Meaning, he was relaying his experience in the Nazi concentration camps during the Holocaust. And he said that the Nazi guards could take away everything except one thing: his choice of attitude. It was up, no matter what they did, it was up to him to choose his attitude. And once you have that, you have freedom, complete freedom. They can shoot you, but you're dead once you're shot. But you know what I mean. Even though they have control over you physically, you're still free because you have that choice, that choose your attitude. And so, when I've as a mine manager, I'd go to a business and a mine, and I'd have to turn it around. And when I arrived, people wouldn't take responsibility because the management used to tell them what to do. If you free people up and let them get on with the bloody job, it's so liberating. Of course, you still got to provide a small amount of discipline to the few people who won't provide adequate self-discipline. It's not about turning people into a circus. It's about giving people freedom to make choices and the authority. People have authority. When people have authority, they automatically take on responsibility. Well, most of them take on responsibility, and the strongest form of responsibility is self-responsibility. The strongest form of discipline is self-discipline. So when you've got an entity, it doesn't matter whether it's a Senate office or a mine or a corporation, when people are disciplined and accountable because of their own choices, then you can sit back and just watch them flourish because they just take off. It's just beautiful to watch. Humans are absolutely wonderful, and occasionally you get a few dickheads, and we're all dickheads at times. But
of course,
but when you can liberate humans, you have got the most powerful force in the world. And what we've got to do is get people back on track with and holding governments accountable, being actively involved in democracy. Humans are absolutely beautiful.
Yes, we are, and I think not enough people see that because we have a very nihilistic culture at the moment, and it's particularly, I think, it's partly the media to blame, but at the end of the day, as you just said, that story of the person living at the concentration camp, you can have the media against you, you can have bad government, you can have all these bad circumstances, but still, ultimately, it's within you, your true spirit, to come out and shine through all of that. No matter what kind of guns or whatever positions they put you in, it's still up to us. So I think we have to remind people of that because I think they've kind of forgotten that and they feel helpless and they get black-pilled and they're like, okay, well, my life's over, but it's not.
Yeah,
so for everyone listening out there, it's not over. We got this.
Right, and when we see people in the Senate like Sarah Hanson-Young or Nick McKim going on an absolute hate-filled rant and calling us names and labels, I look at them and I go, so much compassion for them. They're in a lot of pain. But I also say things like, well, you know what? You responded with labels and denigration rather than data and reason and logic. So therefore I win the debate. And people at home can see it on the videos we publish, I mean, Sarah Hanson-Young was so out of touch and calling us all kinds of names because she was absolutely terrified about the people that woke up on Sunday and marched for the country. The Labor Party, the Greens know that there's a change going on and people wanting the truth. And they can feel it and they're terrified. And so poor old Sarah Hanson-Young was really in fear, huge fear. Nick McKim the same. And so when somebody attacks us, we've got to treat them with respect, but we've also got to be compassionate towards them. But we've got to look after ourselves first and look after the people of Australia. So
Yeah. It's always good fun to have a bit of banter, you know? Doesn't hurt to have a bit of banter here and there. That's what I like to tell people, because I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, but I do enjoy the banter sometimes. I do get into it.
as long as it comes from respect.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and,
Well,
and above all, truth.
Yeah, because there is a competitive nature of humanity as well, and you see that when the Olympics are on, or when you watch your favorite sporting team. We're all competitive beings. We all want to compete and do better, and I guess the culture has trying to stamp that down. It's by these participation awards. Everyone gets an award. You get an award. Everyone. It's this DEI, and we haven't really touched on DEI much, but DEI I think is also one of the biggest frauds of the system. This DEI initiative, it's really it goes down to productivity. What DEI is the enemy of productivity, because the truth is you have to reward people who work hard and are naturally talented. You can't just reward everyone. It's not how the system works. It's not how a functioning nation works. And it also leaves people disillusioned, because if you're giving away all these opportunities just because of the color of their skin or their gender, it creates the precedent that you don't need to worry about being productive, because it doesn't matter. As long as you have these specific niches, you'll be fine.
Well,
Have you looked into much?
Sorry?
So I would say, have you looked into DEI and the effects it's had across Australia or in Parliament? Have you seen it translate in your experience?
Well, more than half the people in Parliament probably believe in it, but we've been calling it out. But DEI does something far worse than kill productivity and kill reward, kill motivation. It also creates victims, and that's enormous part of the United Nations and World Economic Forum agenda, as you probably realise, George. You create victims, and the victim is portrayed as a minority, whether it be women or different races or different religions or whatever it may be, whatever the class, or transgender people. There's no such thing as transgender. You cannot change gender. I mean, it's a physical fact. You and I will be males or forever, because our chromosomes are that way. You can slice bits and pieces off our bodies, put us on hormones, and all you do is screw us up. But you won't change the fact that you have got XY chromosomes and your female partner's got XX. That's fact. You can't change that. But what they do is they then make transgender people a victim, and the transgender people then start talking up. But then they are in the victim mentality, or someone from a different race is in victim mentality, or different sex is in the minority, or different religion. And when people are victims, they're helpless, and they're locked into that helplessness, because victimhood is the opposite of responsibility. So you can call me a name. It's my choice as to whether or not I portray myself as a victim. It's not up to you. What's that saying someone taught me once? What you think about me is none of my business. So, am I truly a victim? Okay, I'll fight for my rights. But it's my choice. So what the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, through the Greens are notorious for this. The Labor Party is also notorious for it. The Liberal Party has some sympathy for it. Creating victims, creating division, creating splits in the country. When you split a country, you split groups, then you don't have that cohesive spirit, and then you destroy the country. It's that simple, and that's what they're doing in so many aspects of our society, including DEI. That is what it's all about. It's about dividing the country, smashing the country, and creating disunity. And by the way, the hope is here, because BlackRock, who works through the United Nations and through the World Economic Forum, has itself now, I think it's BlackRock, called out DEI and gone away from DEI, or going away from ESG, because they can see it hurts their profit. It hurts human dignity, but so the people who started this rubbish are starting to move away from it.
And you see that translating now with, some phenomena coming out with the Sydney Sweeney ads, and some of the cultural aspects are starting to shift a little bit. And obviously Disney have lost a lot of money with their movies, like a tremendous amount of money. Marvel have already come out and said that their superhero movies aren't working anymore. No one wants to see it. They're just flop after flop after flop.
Go woke, go broke.
And yeah, exactly. Yes. And it's shameful because there's nothing more meaningful than great cinema. Like the Lord of the Rings trilogy is some of the greatest, most inspirational art of all time. And that, as a young kid watching those things, it really can bring about so much positivity. So it goes back to the art and how meaningful art is. And the thing about victimhood is, this is what people don't realize. When you create victims, what essentially you're doing is you're creating a person who you're not allowed to offend, which meaning you're never allowed to challenge their thought. So they're gaming the system in Parliament by creating these victims so that you can never challenge them, and then that breeds laziness. It breeds no free will, and it allows them to go, well, you can't offend us, so you can't challenge us. You can't challenge us, we are always going to win. So it's almost like they're gaming the system, and kind of like how the Labor are bringing out the mass immigration thing again. I saw a stat, correct me if I'm wrong, something like 80 to 85% of these mass immigration people coming in are actually voting Labor as well. And that might not be a forever thing. That might just be 1 or 2 terms. But still, they're basically importing voters in. So which kind of showcases and highlights that they don't even believe in their own. They don't believe in their own ideology. They don't believe in their own leadership. If you have to resort to that kind of it's quite sad. Essentially, it's quite sad seeing the Labor Party having to do that. And I don't know. Have you pondered about that at all?
Yeah, Matt Barry does some really good work. I don't know if you know of Matt Barry.
No.
We can put you onto him after the show. But Matt Barry, look him up on YouTube. Does some wonderful presentations, hour and a half long. Immigration, mass immigration, housing, which are the two that we've connected as well before Matt. That's not taking anything away from Matt. He has much more. We have to limited time, but he's got the data. He's just a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And then more recently, he's connected up with the electorates. What the Labor Party and the state level is doing in New South Wales is directing new migrants to marginal Liberal seats, and that way they hope to convert them to Labor seats, and then lock themselves into power forever. Reminds me of Barry Jones, the very intelligent, and I think possibly a decent man. I never met him. He was the ALP president. He was a member of Parliament for the Labor Party some years ago. He became Labor president, federal president. And he wrote an article in the Weekend Australian 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember the time. And it would have been about 15, 20 years ago. And he said, the Labor Party deliberately targeted Vietnamese refugees to bring them into the country because they were poor, and they'd locate them in Western Sydney and convert them all to Labor electorates. And he said, the buggers turned into being hard-working entrepreneurs and voted Liberal. So you can't tell what people do. Hard work and responsibility works wonders. But coming back to the DEI and the splitting and the creating of victims, splitting of society, the Greens used to get away with telling lies about gender dysphoria. They supported gender affirmation as the automatic treatment of gender dysphoria. Now, by the way, we're seeing psychology in societies, the Psychology or Psychiatrists Association of New Zealand and Australia and New Zealand came out at last, after years of us talking about it, came out at last and said gender affirmation is not the right treatment for gender dysphoria. Now we're getting doctors coming out all over the world saying gender affirmation treatment is the wrong thing to do. You need to treat these people with exactly what I started saying in the Senate years ago, with love, compassion and support. And you need to treat it as a mental health condition. I'm talking particularly about children. When the Greens introduced the gender dysphoria debate, and they wanted to call it, and then when we spoke against it, or spoken the reality about it, they called us transphobes. They wanted to shut us down. And that's what they do to mothers and fathers. They say, if you don't affirm your kids' choices, you know, at a young age, when they don't know much at all, then you're being transphobic. So what they do is give us a label. That doesn't stop Pauline and me. And so I remember quite often I would be the only one to speak on this issue, and then the Greens would roll out 5 speakers and call me names and all the rest of it. And then we had one session, I can't remember, 18 months ago, 12 months ago. I spoke first. Nick McKim went in an absolute rant. I mean, it was lunacy stuff. And when I spoke, I looked across at him and said, "You've been accusing us of causing children to commit suicide. The reality is that children commit suicide after they have transitioned and realised that the lie that they were told about being able to reverse the transition was a lie, and they couldn't transition back. You're the people killing people." Then we had another 4 speakers from our side of politics. No other Greens. So bit by bit, the facts are emerging. So, you know, they've been able to get away with too much, but that's because people are afraid to speak up, because we might get labelled transphobic, or we might get labelled racist, or we might get labelled a Nazi, or, you know, whatever. But those are just lies from the Greens, and that gives us encouragement when they start telling lies, because lies are a form of control. And always beneath control, George, there is fear. Fear. These people are run with fear. They drive to control, and then when you hold them accountable, they run. And they run by painting you as a label. So when they give me a label, bring it on.
The only problem is, right, with labels, the only reason why labels can actually sustain their impact in terms of strategy, in terms of shutting people down, is because corporate Australia is the one that holds the keys. See, if people were brave enough to speak up against things and be called labels and not feel like they would lose their job over it, then more people would speak up. I feel like because corporate Australia and BlackRock and all these organisations have come in, filled HR with the most wokeified policies, have filled corporate Australia into this just very safe, scary, soul-sucking environment. You, as the people, won't stand up because you don't want to lose your job. You don't want to be labelled a racist because you might lose your job the next day. You might wake up and you can't provide for your family and you've lost everything. So it really comes down to corporate Australia holding the keys to political power. And this is why it's scary. Corporate Australia is essentially the government now, because without people having jobs, without people having finance, without people being able to support their families, they will never speak up because they don't want to lose. They want to, you know, pay for their kids' food. They want to pay for their kids' schooling fees, take them on a holiday. I don't know. Anything like that is gone from one move. And you saw this during the pandemic.
Yep.
You didn't take the experimental medical product, you lose your job.
Yep.
You stand up against, I don't know, for example, the AFL is a great example. We're punishing men for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and then we're filling them with so much pain that they have to cry on camera. And what kind of message does that teach young boys and men out there when they see this man crying in front of his entire nation because he made a mistake and said the wrong word? These things like that corporate Australia have done. I know BlackRock have a big part of AFL and basically run the thing. It's these things that people don't fully... That's why Australians are hard stuck, I feel, because they're literally financially restricted in freedom. I'm not sure if that's kind of been discussed yet, but...
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a very, very powerful incentive. But there's still ways of getting around that. Number one is we're responsible for our own attitude and our response to that. But I'll go to a couple of examples. One was a state high school on the Sunshine Coast. You know, I think it was a high school, not a primary school. And the parents got wind that the principal was going to bring in a what do you call them? What do you call a cross-dresser? I forgot.
A transgender?
No.
Oh, a drag queen.
Thank you, drag queen. Yes.
Yeah.
And the parents said, like hell. And you know, at first, I'm guessing, I can almost bet that the first parent to raise that would have been tentative and walked up to another parent and say, "What do you think about this?" And if they speak openly and honestly amongst themselves, then they soon realise that no one likes it. and then they stand up. And they went to the principal and said, like hell. And the principal backed down. And so another one was we had a marvellous premier up here in Queensland, Joe Bjelke-Petersen, many years ago, and he was very colourful. Longest serving Queensland premier, 23 years I think it was. Maybe not, 21 years, whatever it was very long. But he listened to the people and he worked with the people and he did the right decisions. He made the right decisions for the future of the state. And the state was set up beautifully. Cut taxes, increased infrastructure, balanced the budget, did a marvellous job. And he didn't take any notice of the media. But I remember that the media would portray him in other states as a joke. And I lived in Queensland at the time, but I'd worked 6 months. This is when I was working as a coalface miner underground. I'd move to a new mine every 6 months and get more experience under different conditions with different people. And so I'd be in New South Wales and I'd go to a party and they'd start ridiculing Joe Bjelke-Petersen because he was good fun to ridicule. And a couple of people would say, I wish we had him here. You know, and then bit by bit you'd change the whole dynamics. So when you get people speaking up, things change. And it might be initially speak up quite carefully and quietly, but then when you get the mass, go for it. And the other thing is that we now know major corporations are going woke because when they go woke, they go broke. And so that's the reality, and that's changing a lot of corporations now. You know, we have this welcome to country that the Albanese government introduced to the first thing we do in the morning in the Parliament, in the Senate, is acknowledge the President. Just the President acknowledges us. We nod our heads to her, and then we're supposed to say the welcome to country. So I had respect for the Senate, so I so I just took part in that. Pauline, from the word go, turned her back on it. Then I started to realise, and this is a wonderful, wonderful thing about Pauline, she doesn't give instructions, she lets you work it out for yourself. And so when we got new senators, I called them up and said, look, I've been thinking over the election period. I think this welcome to country is bullshit. It's demeaning, and I no longer have respect for the Senate because it does that. So I said, how about we all turn our backs with Pauline? And that's what we do. Every morning we turn our backs and then turn around again and face the Senate when it comes to the prayer and the Lord's Prayer. So, you know, they tried to shut us down, but they failed. And they wanted us to conform. But if you persist, but I got to admit that it is a matter of timing as well. When people are ready, they'll do it.
And it's quite sad because the welcome to country, if done well, and done not that much, like the welcome country it's been overdone. But when it's done, I don't know, sometimes here and there, it can actually be quite powerful because it talks about spirituality, talks about connection with the land and spirit and all this stuff, which is actually a positive message Australians should hear. But when you do it every single day, every single sporting event, you take away its meaning. It becomes a meaningless act. So it feels like, this is going to be my conspiracy brain here, I feel like they saw the power of welcome to country and they're like, how do we destroy it? How do we destroy it? You make it so frequent, so annoying that people will never listen to it properly again. Because a real welcome to country, I've talked to Indigenous people up north here at the Flinders Ranges. They said it's not supposed to be a thing you do every single second, every single day. It's a very special, it's a very rare event that's supposed to instill a sense of connection with your spirit. And now they've made it into a joke. And they've basically utilised the welcome to country, made it into a joke, which essentially means that Australians now are not going to look into the ancient spiritual connections of the Aboriginal people. They're going to look past it because they just had enough of it. So it's almost like a Machiavellian style strategy in destroying something that's spiritual, another way to destroy something spiritual, another anti-human event, and doing it very slyly, very maliciously through this sleight of hand technique. And we've seen it in the past. Do something over and over again, people will get sick of it and they won't want to hear it, and they'll just... And you're seeing it in Parliament now. I mean, you just mentioned what they've done to it is they've just basically radicalised it and destroyed it, and it's quite sad, actually.
Yeah, that's one of the things I disagree with you on. I don't think the motive is to destroy it. I think the motive is to destroy unity in the country. I do not need to be welcome to my own country. If I'm attending a function and have been invited to speak at an event and it starts with welcome to country, then when I start my speech, I say I want to acknowledge all the people that preceded us in this country and created the country we have, regardless of race or whatever. Most times I don't mention the word race, but you know what I mean? The people who fought for this country, the people who fought for the flag, and the people who built the country, built the infrastructure that we take for granted nowadays. So I've got nothing. I think acknowledging our predecessors is wonderful, regardless of race, but not based on race. So I disagree with welcome to country, because I don't need to be welcome to my country. If you want an acknowledgement of the past spirit, fine, but not based on race or religion. The other thing is that the term First Nations was introduced from Canada. Many of these things were introduced from Canada. There's also, what's the wording?
The treaty and stuff.
Yeah, thank you. That I'd forgotten. That came from Africa. It came from a UN International Court case that was presented in Africa, and that's where that came from. So that is so insincere and so demeaning of the Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal people have got plenty to be proud of. They're only 3 to 4% of the population, although the numbers have shot up dramatically since the welfare started being paid so easily, and a lot of non-Aboriginals are now claiming Aboriginality, which is again insulting of the Aboriginal people. But the point is that only 3 to 4% of the population, but they're 11% of the parliamentarians. They're way above that in terms of the elites in AFL and NRL. Nampa Jimpa Price is an accomplished person. Warren Mundine is an accomplished person, businessman in his own right. So many Aboriginals are at the top of the game in politics, in sport, in law, in academia, in business. You know, Aboriginals do not need to be held up special and demeaned as being victims or substandard. That's all they're doing. So I don't see, when I see an Aboriginal, I don't see someone who needs help apart from some communities. And that's something else Warren Mundine and Nampa Jimpa Price, to their credit, have spoken about. 80% of Aboriginals, at least, are like the whites and the rest of us in this country. Now, some of the communities have been held back, but they've been held back because of the bloody policies of whiteys who are destroying those communities. And so what we're seeing now is $36 billion of money, state and federal, going to supposedly to Aboriginal communities. It's getting hived off along the way, hijacked, stolen by all the bloody consultants, the academics, the parasites, the lawyers, the counsellors, the bureaucrats, the activists, and it's not getting to the communities. What we would do is gut the Federal Department of Aboriginal Affairs and keep the states going, because that's very important for competitive federalism, which is a core tenet of our Constitution. We'd get back to that core tenet of our Constitution and send grants to the Aboriginal communities based on need, not on race. And then what comes back to your word again, responsibility. If two communities get grants to address a certain problem, then one community pisses it against the wall and the other community does something meaningful with it, the first community looks at the second community in 5 years' time and says, how the hell did you get there? And that's what's needed. I think the Aboriginal people in the communities, the remote communities, are being cosseted and killed. Literally killed through stifling them, with taking away their autonomy, creating victims out of them. What we need to do is release them, give them autonomy, give them the bloody cash, not the parasites in the middle who are hiving it off, and let them get on with their life. Give them autonomy. Because when you have autonomy, you start getting responsibility, then you start getting accountability.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very... Getting to the topic of Aboriginal, I guess, how would I say it, manifest in this country is very... Because you got places like Darwin, you got places like Alice Springs, which have some of the highest crime rates in the world now. Yeah. I mean, the alcohol, you've seen... there's a famous YouTuber called Spaniard who's been to Alice Springs and kind of gave us a window into what's happening over there. It's scary, really, because I mean, I've heard rumours or stuff that if from all the money the government spent, if we space it out, every Aboriginal should have at least $11 million each. That's what I've heard. I mean, it could be completely wrong, but maybe some research needs to be done on that. But to the point where there are some families who have so much money, they will get a Land Cruiser, brand new $200,000 car, crash it, and buy a new one the week after, and just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And it just goes to show that you can't throw money at a problem. There needs to be a level of, yeah, it makes it worse because you create brats.
Yep.
So not only do it's actually damaging to the Aboriginal people because you're creating them into brats, and then they don't have that self-sovereignty anymore. And now this is the next thing, the word sovereign. You can't say the word sovereign anymore because now you're a domestic terrorist. This is the next attack. This is what they do. Language is reality. And now you can't even say the word sovereign without being labelled a police killer, because that's what the media want to do. A sovereign citizen now is an evil person, and it's ridiculous. And that's what they want. They just showed their hand in that moment. If you call yourself sovereign, you call yourself an individual, you call yourself someone that has self-responsibility, you are now an enemy of the state. That's the next step, and that's what I can see the precursor. I can see the writing in the shadows. And now they're coming for sovereignty. That's their move. And it's becoming very clear, and we're at the end game of it now. And, I mean, you might get arrested for saying the word sovereign on a text with the way these digital ID systems will work.
Yep.
Social credit system. You say the word sovereign to your friend, or I'm personally responsible. You might not get paid that week. This is the kind of future we're looking for. And I kind of want to touch with you on that. If we do nothing, we do allow the government to keep doing what they're doing, can you paint me a picture of what you think the future would look like? And I'm not asking you to do this to try and doom and gloom our audience. I'm asking this to kind of activate the audience. When maybe some of them are not truly aware of what their future may look like, or their children's future may look like. When I was at the march last Sunday talking to people, what did most people say? Why were they there? This is what they said to me. I'm here because I care about my children's future. That was the number one answer I received.
Yep.
It wasn't I hate Indians, or I hate this, or I hate mass immigration. The number one answer was, I'm here because I care about my children's future. So I'm asking you now, can you paint a picture for me of what you think the future will look like if we do nothing? And then we can talk about the alternative. What will it look like if we do step up as sovereign humans, as responsible humans? What can that look like?
Okay, that's a long topic, but I'll just go back to, it's a wonderful topic. It's an absolutely essential topic. I admire you for raising it, because people have to know what is coming, and I say is coming, or what they're trying to bring in. Only the people will stop it. But I'll go back to the Aboriginal issue for a moment. I've been concerned about the plight of the Aboriginals in the remote communities. I've been to every community, Cape York, white and black and mixed. I've been to the Aboriginal communities, every one of them, at least twice, and some of them 3 times. I've flown to the communities on the Torres Straits, 2 or 3 of the communities on the Torres Straits. And I can remember being on Bardu Island, and a wonderful counsellor. We were sitting around in a group having a meeting, a few councillors and some of the officials and some of the people in the community. And I said, and every community up in Cape York, I asked this question, what about close the gap? And some of them, I get the response, what's close the gap? So it's not affecting the people on the ground, it's all bullshit. And this councillor stood up and he said, mate, they will never, while ever there's money to be made out of this, they will never close the gap, because the people who are getting the money have a vested interest in perpetuating the gap. That's what an islander told me to my face. And that's exactly what I think is going on. So I just want to make that point. When it comes to the digital identity, there's a suite of five or six bills or provisions. Let's see if I can remember them all. There's the digital ID bill, which they said, no, it's voluntary, you don't have to do it. Well, in Queensland, to get your medical record after being tested for your health, to work in the coal mining industry, you must provide a digital identity to get your health clearance so you can get a job. You want that job? Digital ID. That was a Labor government that made that in Queensland. At the time, it was a federal Labor government that brought in digital identity. But the digital identity legislation and the provisions were developed by the Liberal National Party, introduced by the Labor Party, and away it went. Both of them, they're working like this together. Misinformation, disinformation bill. That's required to control speech. That's basically a censorship bill. If they can accuse you of misinformation and disinformation, then they can stop your access to social media. They can stop your access to various provisions. Precursor to social credit. That was developed by the Morrison government. It was floated by the Morrison government they gave us the draft legislation. They didn't enter it into Parliament to vote on or debate it, but they introduced it to Parliament. Then the Labor Party introduced it to vote on. And this is an important lesson. We created such a stink about that. Pauline and I held a conference in Brisbane. We invited prominent media people to attend it. We got the people aware of it. And there was such an outcry. What happened was the people wrote to the members of the Labor Party in Parliament and said, "Don't you dare bring this in." And so it passed, I think, in the lower house, and then went to committee in the upper house in the Senate, and was consigned to committee, and it stayed there for about 3 months. No one was going to touch it, and so I thought, what the hell? I'll move a motion to get rid of it off the bills list, and it got up. So we got it off the bills list. So that's what the power of the people is. That's how the people can stop that. We also did the same with the bank. The cash ban bill, which would have banned cash over $10,000. People say, well, who pays cash for $10,000? Once that's in, George, as you know, it'll come down to 1,000, then it'll come down to 500, then it'll come down to, you must pay no cash anywhere. And so once they've got you on digital currency everywhere, digital payments everywhere, it's become very easy to bring in a digital currency. And I asked the questions in the Reserve Bank, of the Reserve Bank in Senate estimates, are you working on a digital currency? Yes, Senator Roberts, we are. Is it tied to a global currency? Yes, Senator Roberts, it is. But we're only doing research, that's all. We're just doing the preliminaries. Oh, okay. And I'll talk about the RBA, the Reserve Bank, in a minute. But let's see. Oh, then there was the identity verification bill that came in under Morrison. Oh, hang on, it was introduced. It was worked on by Morrison's Liberal government, introduced by the Labor government, and pushed through. And some of these bills were rammed through with guillotine, no debate or minimal debate, just truncated with the Labor Party and the Greens, the Communist coalition, the Communist shit show, whatever you want to call it. And they now control the Senate. So we've got the Labor Party with the majority in the lower house, where most bills are introduced, not all bills, but most bills. And then we've got a communist coalition with the Labor Party and the Greens in the upper house. So what that means is that if the Labor Party wants to get anything through, it must go to the Greens and get their vote. And so that's why the Greens are controlling what's going on here. So that was the identity verification bill, which made it possible for the government to use biometrics data, fingerprints, facial recognition. That's why you see so many cameras going up around the country. And the United Nations and the World Economic Forum are working with local government to install these cameras, or get the government to the local. They're not governments; they're local councils to install these cameras. There's another component: misinformation, disinformation, digital ID, identity verification. There's the under 16 ban. That's right, the under 16 internet ban. To use your search engine, Safari or Google, to use a bloody map on your phone, you're going to have to put in your ID, because it will only work if you're over 16. So if you're not over 16, then you can't use the internet. So that means you have to prove you're over 16, which means you've got to have your digital ID so that you can access all kinds of sites, not just kiddie sites, so that you can access map. So in other words, they've got you. And then they can, through the cameras, they can identify who you're travelling with, who you're associating with. And then, this is where they went to during COVID. All of these are either in place or have been done. You're presenting misinformation on COVID or the vaccines, the injections, the experimental gene therapy-based treatments. So you're banned from Facebook. And Zuckerberg, who I believe is a globalist, he admitted recently that, and he's probably trying to get back in Trump's good graces, but he admitted that he followed the Biden White House's instructions to ban people, to censor people. We know that. And we know that in this country, despite the denials, they eventually admitted it, that the Department of Home Affairs, which is in charge of security in this country, pretends to be, they were given instructions from the Department of Health on social media to point to posts on social media, Facebook, that they didn't like. That was during COVID. So you were censored under COVID in this country. So there's some of the bills that are there. Now that suite of bills was introduced by the Labor Party and Liberal Party working together. They were in this control apparatus. They're all the bills that are needed for a social credit system. You're not being a conspiracy theorist. You're being a realist, a fact driver, a fact taker. And that's what they want to come. And then we've got the Secretary General of the United Nations holding up a brochure about misinformation and disinformation bills around the world. They're coordinating this around the world. Here's that unelected socialist global governance again. But not only is that a national perspective and a globally introduced bill by provisions by the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, it's in Britain, it's in America to some extent. Trump's trying to dismantle it. It's in Canada, it's in New Zealand, it's in some of the countries in Europe. This is a global attempt to get control, and it's exactly in accordance with United Nations Agenda 21 that I called out in my first speech, that Pauline called out in 1996, was introduced in 1992, signed by the Labor government under Paul Keating, and then implemented by John Howard and the Liberal Party, and it's been implemented ever since. And most of the Liberals do not even know that they're doing it. They're just told to vote on a bill and away it goes. So that's where they're setting up this entity. And when you've got a digital currency, then what it means is that they can control your money. They can control whether or not you can spend it. Oh, and by the way, we don't like the four-wheel drive you've got, George. You need to buy a little battery vehicle. But that's more money. It's too expensive. Doesn't matter. If you want to get a house loan, you'll buy the electric vehicle, which is already subsidised by taxpayers. So it's about Agenda 21 is about unelected socialist global governance. What they're doing is they're using biodiversity provisions. So see that fungus you've got in the backyard? See that moth you've got in your backyard? See that skink you've got in the backyard? Sorry, mate, you can't build the renovations because that's more important than you are. And extending that, this is fact that the Greens are pushing, that lawyers from the the so-called environmental side are pushing. They want the power to represent rocks, plants, fungus, any living entity, any rock, a creek, a river, a valley, a mountain, because they've got to protect it from you and me. That's why they want that. And they want that. And why do they want it? Because that's going to steal your property rights. And without property rights, we are buggered. We are completely destroyed. And then the second thing is what they call UN sustainability goals, Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 topics. This has all been in writing since 1992 when Maurice Strong, the guy who said the enemy is humanity itself, he introduced this. So that Sustainable Development Goals cover every aspect of your life. What you eat, how you eat it, when you eat it, your energy, whether or not you're entitled to it, how much you're entitled to it, what sort of energy, your travel, your movement, your house, what you can and can't do in your house, everything. We've even got the government accepting at the productivity roundtable, which was really a tax summit. They were introducing foreshadowing taxes. One of them was bringing back estate taxes, grave robbing taxes, take your wealth from the grave after you die. Another one was land tax. But another one was a bedroom tax. So we've got a housing crisis. So if you've got a spare bedroom, the kids have grown up and moved away, and you want to keep that spare bedroom for when they come with the grandkids, you've got to declare how many spare bedrooms you've got. Now, then that means someone's got to tell us whether or not a study is a bedroom, whether or not a rumpus room is a bedroom. So you've got all this kind of intrusion. And then if you persist in not renting out your bedroom, that you'll be taxed on it. So that means there's an incentive for older people to rent out their spare bedrooms. What? So these are the kinds of things that they're trying to drive. But so there was something I was going to mention there. Oh, that's right. So that's the picture. And at the moment in Australia, we are one of the heaviest taxed nations in the world. But the corporations, who are 90% foreign-owned multinationals, many do not pay company tax. So they come here, use our resources, use our infrastructure, use our education system to provide their workers. We've got the world's largest tax evader, Chevron, in the Northwest Shelf, exporting huge quantities of natural gas and pay us hardly anything in resources. Don't pay us anything in tax, in royalties rather. Don't hardly pay anything in royalties. Don't pay in tax. Who pays their share of tax? You and I, mums and dads around the country. The families are getting slugged in this country. So what that does is it forces people to have both partners working, which means that the kids aren't managed, aren't looked after. Instead, for the critical years of their development, they get sent to babysitting, childminding at a state government indoctrination program, commonly called education. It's no longer education, it's indoctrination. And that's where all the woke bullshit, anti-human bullshit is fed to their little minds, and that's indoctrinated for life. So the story I was going to tell you about the Reserve Bank, when I first got into the Senate, I saw a request. Can you please tell us the departments and agencies you want to call before you at the Senate estimates, which is where we ask questions about the way they spend their money, what the policies they have, etc. And I said, sure, okay. So every senator gets that request. And I put down the Reserve Bank. And another senator who arrived with me at the same time, hardly any experience, she was chair of the Finance Committee. And she came to me and said, sorry, you can't have the Reserve Bank. Why can't I have the Reserve Bank? You just can't have the Reserve Bank. Why? You just can't. Why? You just can't. Who pays their tax? Who pays their wages? Taxpayers. I want the Reserve Bank. I'll come back to you. So she went away and came back a couple of days later and said, we'll give you a deal. You can either have the Reserve Bank in private, not televised, next week, or you can have them at estimates in 6 months' time. So I didn't know what I was doing, so I just said, I'll strike while the iron's hot. I'll have them next week in private. So we got to ask questions. Then they were out at the hearings, Senate estimate hearings from then on. Then I got knocked out with dual citizenship. And when I came back, the Reserve Bank wasn't appearing at Senate estimates hearings. So I had a stand-up shouting match with, wasn't shouting, but it was pretty heated, match with Matthias Cormann, the Liberal National Finance Minister. They've been with us ever since. But that's the way people avoid scrutiny. And we don't ask questions to be nasty. We ask questions because you expect us to hold these people accountable. They're paid by taxpayers. And the governments, both Labor and Liberal, try to avoid accountability. They try to hide things. Chris Bowen, the energy minister, is taking a lot of subsidies for solar and wind offline. He's manipulating the agencies so that these do not come under scrutiny. What are they afraid of? What are they embarrassed about? I'll tell you what they're afraid of. Solar and wind cannot stand by themselves. They must have subsidies, and they're getting billions of dollars tossed at them. Where does that money come from? It comes from your electricity bill, and it comes from taxpayers' taxes. That's where it comes from. We are destroying this country because we're raising power prices, and we agreed a little while ago that the second most important key to productivity and standard of living and cost of living is energy prices. And Australia went from being the cheapest in the world to John Howard introducing the renewable energy target. Now it's one of the most expensive in the world, the most expensive outside Europe. I mean, they're destroying the country and they're trying to hide it from us.
Yeah, they are, and it's It's clear as day. And the thing is, I mean, we're all watching what's happening in England, and the people will fight back eventually. Do you see there is a fight back happening now? Do you think this is our moment? We don't need to go all the way down there to that future that we're speaking of. We can do that right now.
Thank you. That's a great
Or,
point.
yeah, because the thing is, this is the argument here. Oh, like a lot of the right, in particular, was like they're accelerationists. They want this stuff to happen quicker to prove a point. And I say to them, look, we don't need to be accelerationists. We have England to look at as a precursor. Why we have data of the future 4 years ahead. Why do we need to accelerate it? We don't need to accelerate it. It's quite clear what's going to happen. So using that, we can learn and we can use strategy that we're seeing implemented in England. I have faith in England. I think England will get their country back. Do you see Australians, or if you had to give advice to Australians, how do they get activated? And I know it's a lot of it is self-responsibility, yes, but there's also a responsibility for politicians to kind of communicate to the people. How do we get activated? How do educate those who want to make a difference but just don't know how? There's a lot of people who just sit there in my comments section and they watch my videos. This last month, I've reached over 10 million people, right? How do those 10 million people get activated, in your opinion?
Well, you've asked many questions there. We don't have to wait for Britain to wake up, because Harry Truman, the President of the United States at the end of the Second World War, he said he wrote a very, very well read, very, very well read president, probably the most well read ever. American presidents are guilty of not knowing much about what happens outside of America because there's so much happening inside the country. But he was phenomenally well read. He said, "The only thing new in the world is the history you have not read. It's all happened before." The essential, as we talked about early on in this conversation, the desire to control is part of this, amongst some people, is the eternal battle between control and freedom, within each of us, between each of us, sometimes between each of us, between groups, between nations. It's the cause of war. It's the cause of violence. It's the cause of upset. It's the cause of alienation. The only thing new in the world is the history you haven't read, and it's all about the ego. So that's one thing. Now, second thing is, you talked about Britain. I'm not so sure that it can be resurrected, because what I've been told is that London is now in the throes of being overtaken by Islam. And Muslim people, individuals, are just like you and I. They're wonderful people. They've got, in fact, some of them are more conservative when it comes to family and values and Christian values than many so-called pretend Christians. So they like what we value in Australia. But when you get Islam, then you get a takeover of a country. Islam is an ideology. It's a way of structuring society, just like Hitler's Nazism, just like socialism, just like communism. And it is evil. It's based on control and punitive and violence. And we can see that all over the world. They don't tolerate their own people who disagree with them. So Islam is destroying France. It's destroying Paris, apparently. I haven't been there. But there are enclaves where it's been reported that the police will not enter. The same is happening in London, from what we understand. There are many prominent cities in England and Britain that have been led by Islamic mayors. And I'm terrified of Islam, and that's why we should not be importing Islamic extremists here. I mean, the government, the Labor government, brought in thousands of Gaza refugees which could be infiltrated by Hamas. I mean, and they admitted they didn't vet them. They had to vet them on the plane coming here, and they sent some back. I mean, this is bloody ridiculous. We've got 280 criminals that the High Court said must be released because the government broke the law, and they're now wandering the streets. We've got pedophiles amongst them. We've got contract killers amongst them. We've got rapists amongst them, murderers amongst them. They're out on the street, and the government should have been preventatively should have stopped them from coming into the country in the first place, then should have enacted laws to get them shipped out in the second place once they're here. But they didn't do that. We're still dealing with these people. Now we've got to deal with Nauru to give them up to around $1 billion over the next 30 years to take these mongrels. Now, Islamic extremists are the enemy of our society. So I'm not so sure that it can be reversed, other than by getting them out of the country and being very, very hard on them. You know, the Japanese, the South Koreans, the Taiwanese, the Singaporeans, the Chinese, they're very tight on who they let in. They do not let in Islamic extremists. They're flat out letting in Muslims. The Chinese, I think, take a very dim view of letting Muslims into the country because they value their social cohesion. So I'm not so sure that it is reversible unless we are really strict with being anti-Islamic extremism. The third thing you asked about was how do politicians communicate. I think the first thing politicians have to do is wake the hell up themselves. I mean, it's not difficult to get information about Agenda 21, about the United Nations, about the World Economic Forum. I didn't know until about 2012. I worked out through my climate. Someone asked me to get involved in the anti-climate fraud movement, and I got involved, and then a very short time later I thought, hang on a minute, I've got to get my data. So I did the research on the science and found it was crap. There's nothing there. The actual data contradicts what this climate fraud is based on. That's the first thing. The second thing was I then started chasing who was perpetrating this rubbish, and it was the United Nations. And then I thought, well, what's the motivation? Then I learned out who was behind the United Nations, and that's basically the globalists who want to put in place unelected socialist global governance. The BlackRocks, Vanguards, they want to return humanity to feudalism so that we're useless eaters and we just become producers and we're given a basic living to survive and just become producers, basically slaves. So, I found that out on my own. I've withstood labels for being a conspiracy theorist or tinfoil hat wearer or climate denier, whatever. But it's important that politicians learn for themselves, and then they can start talking out. I haven't stopped talking about it. I have a very good friend. He's now in his 80s. He's fought for freedom for 65 years, ever since he was 20, and he's spoken out. He's been outspoken in speaking out, and he called me up when I just got into the Senate, and he said, "For goodness sake, don't speak about Agenda 21." Because he was afraid I'd get ridiculed. So my first speech, I not only spoke about Agenda 21, I spoke about I called on the government to pull out of the United Nations altogether. And that's what you've got to do. You can't run away from it. You've got to take the fight to them. And so the first few times I got ridiculed and shouted down and all the rest of it. But now they know that that's what I think. And they're starting to wake up to it. And more of the Liberals are starting to wake up. The Labor Party has no hope. They'll never wake up to it. But what I'm saying is politicians have a responsibility to educate themselves, to dig into the data, and then to speak up and educate people. It doesn't matter if Pauline and I are the only ones doing it. We're joined by Tyron Whitten now. And three of us will keep speaking out about it because we value our country and the people.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's true. You do have to just keep speaking because the thing is, I mean, social media is a double-edged sword. It's been one of the best things for humanity, but one of the worst things for humanity. And it always comes down to the leadership of social media as well. Who's leading the charge? And, you mentioned Mark Zuckerberg before. It's hard to tell. Is he just swinging around depending on who's in power? Is he actually changing? It's hard to read because he has gone into UFC lately and he's become friends with a lot of fighters and warriors. And typically, when you become friends with these UFC types, it does instill a bit of... it can turn you into a conservative, essentially. When you're in the ring and you're doing mixed martial arts, it's not an easy thing to do. So I'm hoping Mark as a person is growing and he's not just doing this to keep the government on board. But it's very hard to read. But yeah, it is going to come down to like the Elon Musk as well for buying X or Twitter and then turning it to X. I mean, without that, my job would be basically virtually impossible because instantly the window of the international world is closed off to me. And for example, the only reason we have any clarity around what's happening in England is because of X and these platforms. So it is important that we do have a source of information that is free from the constraints of the globalists and what they truly want. So that has been a big positive shift for us. I guess getting people to access that information, and as you said before, Truman, was it President Truman, right? He said he was well read in international matters, and he's right. In history, everything that's happened in history has happened. And the reason why I have hope is Spain once was conquered by Islamists, and they seem to, what was it, a few 400 years ago, a few hundred years ago, they were completely conquered, but they managed to get their country back. So there is, I mean, even if England does fall essentially, there is a way for them out. They're out of this. England is the home of the myth of King Arthur, and King Arthur, and this with his Excalibur, instilled these principles that have shaped all of the Western world in such a powerful way. So I still have that hope and belief in England. So call me crazy, but I hope England can resurrect and break away, because that would be so meaningful and impactful for Australians as well to see that happen. Because England is our, home essentially.
Yeah, it is. I'm very pleased that you recognise that. But the bigger picture is one of hope, because freedom is an inherent characteristic of the universe. And when you fight the universe, you're going to lose. So freedom will eventually prevail. It's part of, I'm on a journey, you're on a journey in life from birth to death in this form, and that's the journey for each of us. But nations are on a journey. Humanity's on a journey as well. So history shows that freedom eventually prevails. Maybe after misery, maybe after some anarchy. But I was going to mention something else, and I've forgotten what that was. The media, there are three forms of media now, and you're a very vital part of that media. The first media is I should mention it in reverse order. So the third media is the globalist, legacy, lamestream, misery media, what we take for granted as the media. It's just a shit show. It's a propaganda outfit. We've also got tied up in that Hollywood, which is propaganda outfit largely. The subliminal messages that come through there are about suppressing us. So that's the acknowledged media. That's number 3. Number 2 is what I call the antisocial media, and that I call that antisocial because we saw what Facebook, Instagram, X were really like. X under the as it was called, Twitter, were under the old owners. Were about censorship and control and that's it. So X has done not only a favour. Elon Musk has done not only a favour in converting Twitter to X, but now Facebook has had to free up its controls, and Instagram, because they were losing people to X. So that's the benefit of competition. But the biggest media these days, the most important media, it's not the biggest, but the most important media is the free, independent, truth-seeking people's media. That's what you're doing. And people have... And look at Rogan. Rogan in the United States had... who was it? Dr. Robert Malone on, and he got 11.8 million views. The biggest network was Tucker Carlson on 3.8. And then CNN, which used to be one of the top 3, was ninth at 800,000 views. 11.6 million compared to 800,000. Come on, they're losing because they've lost trust, and that trust is so important. So that's what I was going to mention. Trust. The English people, the English civilization did bring us trust and freedom, but actually someone else before that. And we've got to keep each of us has got to keep learning, because I didn't know what I'm about to say until I went to a church and state conference with Dave Pello, organised it here in Brisbane, and he's running them around the country. They're the best conference, in my opinion, in Australia, church and state. But someone, and he's got such wonderful speakers each year, and one of them pointed out that Christianity gave us truth. Christ's message was not just love, not just compassion, not just forgiveness, which is extremely powerful, not just respect, but it gave us truth. It wasn't until Christ came along that we humans started valuing truth. It's a very important principle, and that's what we've got to get back to, and that comes by open debate. The governments, the United Nations, want to bring in misinformation, disinformation bill. and controls. It's really about censorship. The best way to stop misinformation is free, open debate, free speech, fight it out. We don't have free speech anymore because people who push a certain agenda against the government narrative, whether it be climate or COVID or anything, gender, they get shouted down, get labelled. They get kids being indoctrinated to close their minds. So it's already in place to many extents. And as I said a little while ago, if I hold a gun to your head, people know I've got you under control. But if I indoctrinate you from when you're this long, you don't even know I've got you under control. So that's where we've got to get people to wake up and look at what's going on. It comes back to the individual.
Yep, and that is an ontological battle. That is why philosophy is so important. I think philosophy should be taught at all schools.
Yep.
But not just like the woke philosophy. I mean true philosophy in the sense of the word. Ontology, metaphysics, Christianity, theology, all the religions. And once you have a grasp of that, it's very hard to be controlled. And what does philosophy mean? Philosophy means the love of life in ancient Greek. When you love life, when you love knowledge, when you love the universe itself and the creation of God, nothing can control you. And that's what they don't want. They need to stifle that at every point. And we see that because it's a reflection of their governance. It's a reflection of their policies. It's a reflection of how they treat entrepreneurs. It's a reflection of how they conduct themselves during emergency situations like we saw. They treated us like stupid children, when in reality we are all incredible, intelligent humans who know the truth, and we felt it in our hearts. That's why a lot of us didn't budge. And I'm sure, from your actions during pandemic to even all the way back to 9/11. I mean, this is when it really kind of kicked off. 9/11, when that started, we saw the digital surveillance world really creep in. It was the whole world shifted forever. It was definitely a momentous moment, and it was the precedent that sent. I mean, you probably know the stories. Before you could go to an airport, you could have a cigarette in your hand, you could just walk up. There was a sense of freedom, there was a sense of trust, and ever since that day, it's all about surveillance, scanning. Yep. Who are you? Where are you going? What are you doing? If you treat your people like that, it's like having a friend. Imagine if I had a friend, and every time he came over, I was like, "Sorry, mate, I just need to scan you before you come in. I don't trust you. Where's your papers? Come into my house. Oh, you want some water? Wait, sorry, I just need to check who you are first." And then as they're leaving, "Sorry, mate, can you just pull your pockets out and show me everything inside your pockets?" I mean, what kind of friend is that? What kind of friendship do you develop? What kind of precedent do you set to the humanity when that lack of trust? And they always call it safety and this. It's always about safety. It's always about being, But no, if you treat your friend like that, they're going to hate you. And that's what we've seen after decades of mistrust, of not trusting humanity. We've alluded to this. I mean, it's kind of, this is the reflection, this is the mirror of what today is. And the further we go down this rabbit hole, the further we treat people with mistrust, we're basically incentivizing a poorer humanity through these policies. And it's kind of sad, because there was many decades where flying was fine. It just took one event, and there you go. Gave the globalists exactly what they wanted.
Well, I wrote a few things that came to my mind. First of all, government has almost always been about wealth transfer. Even under a monarchy where the king seems to have all the power, or the queen seems to have all the power, they stay in power only while they can keep the main lords satisfied. So they make sure that the systems are there to transfer wealth from we the people to the lords. That's how feudalism stayed in place. It was only the birth of the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the science came along, and instead of having the most powerful security guards controlling things, instead of having all the wealth to control things, instead of having the land to control things, instead of having a religion to control things, all of a sudden you had to have objective data, and that freed up people. That led to the Industrial Revolution. And look how far we came from the birthplace of humans over the millennia to 1850 in the start of the Industrial Revolution. We still scratching around in the dirt, most of our ancestors, in 1850. Industrial Revolution came and the whole of the West was liberated in every sense of the word, including spiritually, for those who wanted it. And then that took place over 100 years. China came along, said, we want some of what you've got, coal, oil, natural gas, cheap energy, and China is now the world's biggest producer of coal. It produces 4.5 billion tonnes. We produce about 567 million, 1/9 of what they produce. So it's all bullshit what they're telling us. And who's making money out of the transition to solar and wind? China, who's using our coal and their own coal to build solar and wind and ship it here, and we subsidise them to do it. And then we ship our manufacturing back to them. But the point I'm getting to is that it's about wealth transfer. And that's been made possible by governments. And then what happens now, we're free because of the Industrial Revolution. China is doing what we did in the West in 100 years, in 40 years. India will do it in 30 years, maybe 20 years. And the rest of Asia and the Africans will copy. That's why they want coal, oil and natural gas. That's the secret to human progress, the secret to human civilization, the secret to human development. 9/11... I haven't done research on 9/11 at depth, so I don't comment on much about it unless I know something. Unless I got the facts, I don't comment much about it. But I do have two questions about 9/11, not for you, but for anyone who raises it, and that is, what caused Building 7 to collapse? How did that collapse? And George W. Bush was president at the time. He never had a formal, deep inquiry into that event. His incoming president replacement, Obama, never had an inquiry. Why not? They're pretty fundamental questions for me. Your other point about I think it's called the Pygmalion effect. People live up to their expectations. If you don't trust people, they're not worthy of trust. They'll make sure they're not, because people live up to their expectations of them. That applies across the whole of society. You made a really good point, George, when you said that a lot of these things are about catastrophes and safety and fear. They push this rubbish, these controls based upon creating fear, which they do through affecting your safety or your security. But the other thing they do is they use convenience. That's how they'll try and get rid of cash, by making it so easy to use digital currency and difficult to use cash. Shutting down bank branches, deliberate ploy. Shutting down ATMs in the suburbs, deliberate ploy to make it difficult to get cash. I used to use a credit card for everything. Once I became aware of the cash ban agenda and the social credit systems that are being designed and the central bank digital currencies, I now rarely use a credit card. I go to the bank, it takes time, I go to the bank or an ATM and get cash, and I use cash everywhere. And if I go to a restaurant or a coffee shop, I say, do you use cash? No? Okay, well, I'm not buying here. See you later. And we're seeing an increase in use of cash. It comes down, so just coming back to that safety and fear, the other thing they use is belonging. It's a very, very important need, a significant need, very high up in our hierarchies to belong. And that's what they use. And they use it all through COVID. That's why they use labels. If you don't fit in with the narrative, then they exclude you. The universities are full of academics who've been... they're not full of academics, the rest. The ones who don't belong, the ones who don't kowtow and don't sign up for the agenda, they're excluded. So what we've got is universities filled with indoctrinators because they've got to keep their income going. So the other thing is they label, tarnish those who disagree with the narrative. And so what that means, if we go back, the sense that the need to belong is a very high need in people's lives, in humans' lives. If our early ancestors, I'm not very big, but even the very biggest human, Arnold Schwarzenegger say, the strongest human, when he was fit, is no match for a leopard or a cheetah or a tiger. Arnold Schwarzenegger's dead in minutes at the hands of a cheetah. So, but what we've got is we've got social skills, we've got language skills, we've got teamwork skills, and we've got a phenomenal brain. No animal can come close to us with our reasoning powers. And so what we did was we worked out that as a small group of people, a few families, a small tribe, we could defend ourselves, and we could even hunt tigers and cheetahs by working together. But it meant it being at night against some of the nocturnal prey animals, we would have to be on guard. So if you fell asleep and a tiger got in and killed some members of the tribe, you're culpable, and you'd be banned for life and then you don't survive on your own. You don't survive in the jungle. So what I'm saying is, it became a very, very big need to belong, to conform, and that's so important with humans. There are obvious social benefits to that, but there are obviously social controls that people who want to control others can use to tag into that sense of belonging. We saw it in COVID. Get your shot for granny, but it's not been tested. Get your shot for granny. Oh shit, I better do that. So that's how they tie to that. That's what makes us vulnerable and weak. Some of us, I suspect you're one, don't worry about if we're ostracised. We don't have, our sense of belonging is there, but it's not as high as our sense for integrity, our sense for courage. Or maybe we've got more freedom in terms of savings in the bank, so we don't need to keep working to get an injection to keep working. So it just depends. Well, I don't condemn anyone for what they do in that sense, because I don't know their background. So anyway, it's a sense of convenience.
Great point. I guess that's why I never really made it for a great bureaucrat in all my time in Parliament. Because yeah, it was probably my Achilles heel. But I was never living in fear. I was always sure that I would always be okay. That was kind of the main point. I said, as long as I listened to my heart and into my inner spirit, like regardless of my work or finance, I'd be fine. And it's always worked out that way. And if anything, when you are your true self, when you are being your true self, when you speak your true word, you will find your people. And that's what's happened to me. By me being who I am, by me expressing myself truly, I found people who are willing to look after me and give me work to do that fills me with meaning and something. And that gives me a lot of joy and peace in my heart, because a lot of people just do jobs because, and they have to do it. I'm not having to go at them, but they can live a life of misery, unfortunately, if they haven't fully, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying with corporate Australia, creating this kind of, I guess, environment. And I guess I'm just trying to call to action to corporate Australia through our interview that corporate Australia, if you're listening, it's fine to allow your people to be free. The risks, it's not that risk anymore. You don't have to be worried about being cancelled. This woke stuff doesn't work anymore. The people of Australia have woken up. We want corporate Australia to be fun and free like you guys were in the 80s and 90s. We miss old corporate Australia, essentially. We don't need this new woke stuff. So I guess that's kind of where, it's good having, senators like yourself leading the charge in Parliament, because without that, and the consistency of it, you just don't give up. You're just going and going and going. I feel like that also is a huge testament to what you've accomplished. And I mean, you've left me very proud to be Australian right now, which is good, because knowing that you're in there makes me proud, which is great, because that's what we should be. We should be proud of our politicians. We should be full of hope. We should be, and I'm not trying to say this to like blow smoke up you or whatever. It's more just a genuine feeling that I wish Labor people had, truly. I wish Liberal people had, truly. There's no reason why. So before I leave you to it, because we're getting to the 2.5 hour mark, and I've just had such a fantastic conversation, and I don't want you to be a stranger. I want you to come back, and we can even do little updates here and there. What would be your final message to Australians right now in the times we're living? It feels like things are bubbling up to this very intense moment in history for this country. What is your message to the people, and what would you like them to take away from this?
Well, think about that while I reflect on your questions, your comments about education as well, because Rockefeller, about corporate Australia wanting to control and stifle. The most powerful thing in any human, apart from love and sense of responsibility, the most powerful thing for giving to others is the creativity and the initiative. Free people have more creativity. Free people have more initiative. Free people have more get up and go. And so a corporation that is suppressing people is just like a corporation that doesn't employ a certain group of people. I believe diversity is really important. Not because, certainly not when it's mandated, because then you don't get true diversity, you don't get freedom. But I deliberately look for people who didn't come from the standard background as a coal miner, because they were more likely to be able to contribute openly, think outside the square. The education system, don't pay any attention to university degrees unless there's a formal qualification needed for the job. Rockefeller in the 1880s, what was that, John Rockefeller or David Rockefeller? I can't remember. Let's go back even further. Before America, the British in their education system kept education for the ruling elites because they didn't want the masses to be empowered. They didn't want the masses. Jefferson came along in America and said, I want the masses to be educated because then it makes the whole country stronger. And that's why true diversity, not mandated diversity, bullshit diversity, but true diversity makes a corporation stronger. You know, I worked in America for 5 years. I worked and lived in America for 5 years, and one of the places I worked was West Virginia. And the human resources vice president for the division in northern West Virginia, she was female. And she told me one day that she only got a job because she was female. What does that do to her? That's you know, you've got to do it on merit, but we've got to give people the incentive by hiring freely and openly. But if you're one of the old style that only hired white males, well, you're doing yourself a disservice. So get into diversity for the right reasons. Anyway, Jefferson said, educate everyone. Along came Rockefeller in the 1880s, and he openly said this. I want public education not to turn out brain surgeons, not to turn out philosophers, not to turn out highly qualified people who can think. I want cannon fodder for the factories. I want factory fodder. And I want to regiment people. And John Taylor Gatto, the renowned American educationalist, he quotes that. And so whenever we try to control, it hurts ourselves. So the corporations who are controlling people they hire because of some regulation are hurting themselves. You've got to break out and be free. The thing I would say to people, to answer the last question, George, is that trust people, but don't rely on them. Because of the ego, don't rely on them. And especially politicians, because it's the systems within which people are working that drive people's behaviour. I can go into many examples there, but if you pause and think about it, the systems are what drives behaviour. We've got party systems which drive party-aligned behaviours, bugger the rest of the country, bugger the people. That's what's destroying the country. So what I'm amazed at, first of all, I'm not amazed that people don't trust politicians. Most politicians are not worthy of trust. What I'm amazed at is that they bag politicians, they call them untrustworthy, call them incompetent, and rightly so. Then the moment the shit hits the fan, they say, what's your opinion of this? People don't stop believing in the authority figure. It's notorious within humans, it might be tied up with this sense of belonging. When the shit hits the fan, they turn to the authority figure. It's the bloody authority figure that's inevitably causing the problem quite often. What I'd urge people to do is to think for themselves, look within, talk to your mates, the good mates that are trusted, and work it out for yourself. Don't rely on politicians, don't rely on media. You don't have to vote the way they tell you. You don't have to buy the mouthpiece media, the globalist media. Stop buying the mouthpiece media. Stop buying the indoctrination. Look after your kids, and be yourself. Trust yourself, and get with a small group of people or a large group of people who are similar to you, and just build that trust and think for yourself.
That's wonderful. I love that. And it always comes down to self-responsibility, and it is the feed loop of what we've been talking about today. Is the remarkable message that the answers are truly in here.
Yep.
Here. And then that's really where they lie. You don't need anyone to teach you anything. It really is here. But yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you, Senator Malcolm Roberts, again for giving up so much time and just giving us a little insight into who you are as a person, as a human. I see you for who you are, and I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm just honoured. And yeah, don't be a stranger. It'd be great to have you back. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and till next time.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the very warm atmosphere in which I find myself, George. And above all, thank you for doing what you're doing. Keep doing it, because we've got to get the free, independent people's media to get the trust and the truth.
I will. Thank you.